across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome to Morning Glory. It's Friday. We've reached the end of yet another tumultuous week of news, ladies and gentlemen. We've got yet more incredible stories for you between now and 10 o'clock in the morning. Benedict Spencer's here. We're going to be sharing our views on what's going on in the morning papers. We're going to be looking ahead as well to a big weekend. Sir Keir Starmer having gone off to Ukraine yesterday and promised to spend £4.5 billion of taxpayers' money on the glorious 100-year relationship with Vladimir Zelensky. I don't know why that was. He's off to Poland today, and then presumably he's off to Davos for the WEF summit. So who knows when he's ever going to come back to Britain. Perhaps if he stays away for long enough, by the time he gets back, everything will be sorted out. I very much doubt it, though. On the front pages this morning, we've got this from the Daily Mail. Labour blasted over toothless grooming probes. Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, has basically decided that she doesn't want to have a national inquiry because that would be like giving in to the mob. That would be like giving in to all those people from the far right who've been demanding a national inquiry into the grooming gang situation. No. Instead, what she's going to do, she's going to give a whole load of smaller, local grooming gang inquiries, the proper authority to look into what happened wherever it is that the grooming gangs went on. But Labour faced fury last night for launching toothless small-scale probes into grooming gangs instead of a full national inquiry. But let's face it, if you are doing loads of local ones, isn't that just like a national inquiry? Rachel Reeves, meanwhile, doesn't want anyone to feel sorry for her. She's got a front page on the Daily Telegraph in which she says, "I won't let them get me down." Defiant Chancellor likens herself to Thatcher as critics call for her to quit over poor growth. I don't know whether she's likening herself to Margaret Thatcher or Thatcher's cider, but Thatcher's cider is probably more likely, I'd have to say. She's about as much like Margaret Thatcher as I am. Meanwhile, we're going to be talking about the peace deal, which appears to be back on track between Israel and Hamas. Joe Biden, of course, is entering his more or less final day of working as the President of the United States of America, because on Monday, suddenly it's all changed. The inauguration takes place with Donald Trump, the 47th President of the United States of America. Big story in the Times this morning in which it says that the young people of this country are under so much stress that they've taken an awful lot of time off. They can't go to work anymore without having to think about how stressed out they are. It is quite an extraordinary story. Basically, it says almost a third of young workers were signed off work with stress last year. Incredible. Also, one final one for you, just to keep you smiling. How do you tell if somebody is a criminal? Apparently, they've got a Scouse accent. I'm not trying to be offensive. It just says it here in front of me. Scientists have worked out that the accent that sounds the most criminal, and this is in the Daily Telegraph, you know, His Majesty's Daily Telegraph, is the accent from Liverpool. I'm sorry about that. 5 minutes past 6. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. Welcome to Morning Glory, 5 minutes past 6. Benedict Spencer's here. Good to see you, Benedict. And we must kick off, I suppose, with the toothless grooming gang probes on the front page of the Daily Mail. I mean, Yvette Cooper has done, to all intents and purposes, what looks like a U-turn in government, doesn't it? It looks as though after all the pressure that was brought to bear by Kemi Badenoch, by Nigel Farage, by almost every single individual in this country who said you must have an inquiry, even though Keir Starmer says he doesn't want to have an inquiry, they're now having an inquiry.
Yeah, and by Elon Musk. Let's not forget that.
Yes.
For all of the cries of what on earth has he got to do with British politics? Why is he sticking his nose in?
Yes.
Well, I don't know, but he's certainly having an impact, because all he's done is sent a few tweets, and now we're having an inquiry of sorts. Although it's a series of local level inquiries, isn't it? It's not a full national inquiry. So we've not actually got what we want yet, what we need yet, but. The fact that I think that this government can be sort of pressured in that direction to, as you say, form most of a U-turn, not a quite full U-turn yet, shows, though, that they are under pressure, they're feeling the pressure, and that also they do recognise that this is, in fact, a problem. It's not going to go away.
Right.
You know, when you're talking about the scale of this thing and the sort of very visceral sense of anger that I think is still felt, I don't think it's going to go far enough to say to local authorities, many of which are implicated in the handling of this, hold your your own little inquiry, and yeah, we'll absolutely, you know, we'll think that this is enough.
Right.
Does this have the power to compel people to appear and to testify? You know, what are going to be the findings of this sort of thing? How is that going to be compelled? We don't know, and I don't think it goes far enough.
Right. I think you're probably right in everything you've just said. However, it does still keep it up in the firmament of the news agenda. It means that, you know, there will be people asking questions every single day about individual inquiries. It would also mean, as it has today, that an awful lot of victims are still now being heard in the newspapers. In the front pages of the Daily Express, they've got Fiona Goddard, a woman who was repeatedly raped as a child by an Asian grooming gang, has said, why aren't you wanting to find out the real truth? So she's now putting pressure, as many of others will do. Maggie Oliver is also doing the same. I think she's written a letter to the government in which she said we need a proper national inquiry. So it's almost as though they've moved the sort of goalposts towards the grooming inquiry, and I think this is going to be the first move which will eventually lead them to doing it, because they've sort of held their hands up and gone, okay, we'll do a bit.
I do think we'll get there at some point with the full national inquiry, which kind of makes it a bit strange, therefore, that they've not just gone, okay, yes, fine, a full national inquiry.
Yeah, but you know what? Because I think it's all about saving face, isn't it? Keir Starmer's probably said to them, look, we can't just do a national inquiry because it will look as if we've caved into Elon Musk. Yeah,
although this also looks like they've caved in. They're just too spineless to do what needs to be done.
Exactly.
So it's but are we trying to be a little bit sympathetic to Keir Starmer? He's in a difficult position where either way he loses face.
I'm not sure we are. To Keir Starmer, no. I'm sorry. He's just gone to Ukraine without telling anyone the day before he went, or even the week before he went, to spend £4.5 billion of our money, which he says we don't have.
Do you think that was a security thing, not telling anybody? Just in case the Russians thought, oh, here's this man that nobody cares about.
No, I said this to Julie Hartley-Brewer yesterday. I said, I take the view that you can't say operationally, I'm going to Ukraine tomorrow. He didn't have to say that, but he could have said in Parliament, by the way, we are about to sign a new deal with Ukraine, which will guarantee for the next 100 years a partnership the like of which nobody has ever seen. There's no reason why he couldn't have said that, and no reason why he couldn't have then said, and as a sort of a sweetener for that particular deal, we're going to give them £4.5 billion of British taxpayers' money. I think we deserve to know that, don't we?
I think so, especially when this whole, the government's whole sort of shtick for so long has been talking about the size of the black hole in the public finances. I think that they should be incredibly fastidious and forensic, actually, when it comes to revealing what it is that they're going to spend money on. But actually, that's not really how this government operates. It just sort of assumes that we'll all look the other way, that we'll think, oh yes, 22 billion, that's a very large number. Let's just not actually, focus too much on the pennies. But as you say, 4.5 billion there, 9 billion potentially giving to Mauritius for the Chagos Islands, not now going to happen, potentially, thankfully, if that doesn't go ahead. But still, they do take us for mugs. They just sort of assume that we can't add up.
And also, Keir Starmer famously doesn't like being asked questions about anything. I mean, if you saw his performance on Wednesday, the Prime Minister's questions, when Kemi Badenoch was asking me about Tulip Sadiq and what the situation was regarding her resignation, he was almost indignant that such a terribly unimportant question should be asked of him in the House of Commons.
He picked a great line of work, didn't he? He doesn't like forensic scrutiny.
I mean, this is from the government press release that was put out yesterday, right? Funnily enough, most of the papers haven't picked up the financial aspects of it. They've talked about sending British peacekeepers to Ukraine. They've talked about whether we can, whether we can't, whether we've got enough of them. This year, this is what it says. This year, the UK will give more military support to Ukraine than ever before, with £3 billion already committed for lethal aid and the first £1.5 billion from a £2.26 billion loan from immobilised Russian sovereign assets. Now, they say that that's where it's coming from, but the bottom line is that we are giving Ukraine billions and billions of pounds of money which should be being spent in Britain.
It should be. Right? At the very least, it should be being spent on the British Armed Forces. If there are going to be UK peacekeepers at some point in Ukraine, which dubious at this point, then those people are going to have to be armed. They're going to have to be equipped. They're going to have to be trained. It might have escaped people's notice. Our armed forces are in a really, really bad state at the moment. And, because we are not particularly secretive about these things, we actually do test fire our weapons every now and then. We run public operations, that sort of thing, relatively speaking. So the world knows that our nuclear submarines don't work.
Sometimes with not very much success, it must be said.
Exactly.
And that's the other thing, is that, they are terribly, terribly, profligate with money when they feel like being profligate with money, but they're not in any way generous with our money when it comes to pensioners, when it comes to, people who are in need of help, homeless people, for example. They've not done anything about that. And it was pointed out to me yesterday on Twitter that we now have more illegal migrants here than we have members of the British Army. So, you know, that tells you everything you need to know. And I think we were talking to Peter Hitchens yesterday, and he said we spend now more on benefits than we do on our defence.
Yeah, that's...
So that also tells you something about where our priorities lie.
That's crept up on us sort of post-COVID. We did actually, you know, the early days of the coalition government, actually, they did very well on getting a handle on the benefit situation, which, of course, people have forgotten, had completely spiralled out of control, again, under Labour last time round. But COVID is the thing, you know, and the accompanying, we must do everything for everybody, and the state must be very, you know, generous, and people must depend on us, and sort of come out the other side of that, and there's just a staggering amount of money being spent on unemployment benefits, in-work benefits, because work isn't paying enough, but also
disability benefits,
disability, mental health, for which it's now incredibly easy to just get signed off on, and, you know, because the average doctor just goes, yeah, here are the pills, here's your letter, fine, off you go.
Well, we've spoken to GPs on this very show who've admitted to signing people off sick without even seeing them. You know, you send the GP an email and he goes, yeah, fine, no problem at all. We'll come back to that because we've got that story on the front page of the Times. Overworked young staff signed off with stress. But let's have a look at Yvette Cooper. Let's just go back for a moment to the grooming gang story. Yvette Cooper announced these local inquiries yesterday.
We will also provide stronger national backing for local inquiries where they are needed to get truth and justice for victims and survivors.
Yes, justice for victims and survivors. Not quite sure how that's going to work, and there's no kind of frame of reference for these inquiries as to how long they're going to go, who's going to chair them. As you say, you can't really very well say to Oldham Council, well, you do your own inquiry and just get the, I don't know, the head of Oldham Council to run it.
Especially,
you can't do that. Surely you've got to appoint independent people, haven't you? Especially
seeing as there are also allegations that have been made against police officers, including very serious police officers, senior police officers, and councillors in some of these places that, you know, they may have been complicit or involved in some of the abuse, or at the very least in turning a blind eye. So how it is then you can turn to these local authorities and say, yeah, you guys, you just get on with it. It's not really acceptable. And then, of course, if you take the... let's say, hypothetically, that these things are clear-cut and they're thorough. How do you then take the findings of 40, 50, maybe more different towns and local authorities and sort of add them all together in a cohesive way?
And what if there's some connection, for example, which is not inconceivable, between the grooming gangs in Rochdale and the grooming gangs in Oldham, both of which are sort of satellite towns of Manchester, and it would be hard to imagine that they weren't connected in some way.
Yeah, and then you'll have the difficult question of, right, well, where does the jurisdiction begin and end on certain individuals in certain cases? So, yeah, it doesn't make a great deal of sense. If you did it on sort of quite a large scale, so let's just say you did Greater Manchester, let's say the not even Greater Leeds area. Even if you did it by
county, if you did Yorkshire...
Yorkshire, Lancashire, that sort of thing. That would be better than going each local authority. That would be a start, but of course... That would require far too much effort and far too much joined-up thinking.
Also sounds a bit like a national inquiry.
A little bit.
We can't have a national inquiry. I mentioned it once, but I think I got away with it. How about this from Alan in Merseyside? This inquiry is a smokescreen. Labour is not interested in my town, St Helens, which again is another. I mean, it's not quite a satellite town of Manchester, but you could include it in that sort of region, couldn't you?
Yeah.
And that would make a lot more sense.
I mean, the big one that isn't really been spoken about is Bradford. Yeah. Bradford, which, you know, is that it's a major city by itself, but does it count as sort of, you know, a part of, you know, Greater Leeds sort of area, it's sort of morphed into the two. But very little has been spoken about there. But that's a vast sort of can of worms. That just, and this is the thing, we're talking about, you know, Oldham, Rochdale, Rotherham, whatever it is. But there are just that many different major towns and cities that have had these problems.
Well, there's 50, isn't there, more or less? I mean, that's what they've discovered effectively. I mean, what I would say is that it seems to be a step in the right direction. It's a message that the government has in fact taken notice of Elon Musk. If they had just got enough cojones to admit that they were wrong and say, let's actually do a proper national inquiry, then everyone would be happy. But they can't.
Do you know what's kind of wild about all of this, though? An awful lot of this has happened, you know, we're talking sort of over the past 10, 20 years. So it's happened under a previous Labour government, but it's also been happening under successive Tory governments as well. Labour could have had so much goodwill if on day one, rather than say, we put too many people in prisons in this country, they'd said, there's going to be a national inquiry into this, and it's going to be very difficult for everybody, but we're going to sort of grab the bull by the horns. Then we'd be sitting there going, bold, brave, doing the right thing. And instead we're sat here going, another government that's just trying to avoid its responsibility.
And also it looks like they're still trying to cover it all up. That's what it looks like, unfortunately. Let's get a voice note from Chris.
Good morning, Mike. Chris in London. So, 2-tier, free gear, never here, farmer harmer, mumbled speaker, inquiry avoider, 100-year dreamer, one-term leader, has chosen to go off to Poland. Perhaps they have promised not to boo him. Have a great show.
Well, you never can tell. I mean, it'd be great, wouldn't it, if everywhere he goes he gets booed. You know, goes to Ukraine, boo. Goes to Poland, boo. Goes to Davos, boo. You know, but sadly, I don't think... Because he loves that. He loves going to these places. He turned up yesterday, I don't know if you saw this, Benedict, in Kiev, dressed as a member of New Order, where he had this kind of milk tray man type outfit on. Looked absolutely and utterly ridiculous. You know, T-shirted. You know, he's 60-odd years of age. You don't wear T-shirts when you're in your 60s. Sorry, mate. It looks ridiculous. I don't care what Lord Ali says, or his stylist. It is Friday, of course, though, so we do a few gaffes to keep your senses aware, and to keep your sense of humour going as well, because there's a lot to be miserable about in this country at the moment. But hopefully, we will bring a smile to your face. Here's a gaffe from Jeremy Carr.
You might want to talk about the immigration situation. You might want to talk about transgender rights. If somebody in the pub that works there feels offended or anxious because of your comments, you could be elected. Elected. I can't believe I've said erected. They are now. Ryan has fallen on the floor.
Erected. There we are. Jerry Carr back on Monday, of course, with Drive at 4 o'clock. We've got much more to do, including a message for the Scousers. I'm sorry about this, but apparently, according to a scientific study, your accent makes you sound like a criminal. 18 minutes past 6. This is Talk.
Sleepy Joe Biden proved to everyone that he has what it takes to be president. So now we have a new victim to defeat, Kamala Harris, L-Y-I-N apostrophe. Take a look at what happened. In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in, they're eating the cats. Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 21 minutes past 6. We'll get back to Rachel Reeves in a moment, who doesn't want people to feel sorry for her because she says she's absolutely fine and dandy and she's going to carry on doing what she's doing because she's just like Margaret Thatcher. Well, not exactly, is she? And also we'll talk about overworked young staff being signed off with stress. But before we do that, Benedict Spencer's here. Benedict, people talking about grooming gangs. Have a look at this clip we've got. This is from yesterday in the London Assembly. Susan Hall, who used to be the leader of the Conservative group there and who also once ran against Sadiq Khan. There's not much love lost between the two of them, I don't think. But here she is asking Sadiq Khan about whether there are any grooming gangs in London.
I asked you this question last week and you found every which way but not to answer it. Just how many grooming gangs have we got in London?
Avoiding a misunderstanding, can she define what she means by that?
Yes, if you look at what's gone on in Rotherham, where there are people taking young girls, grooming them for sex, that is what I'm talking about.
We know in London there are issues about exploitation of young people, but they're not as defined by the member in her definition of what those types of gangs are.
So are you saying we haven't got the same sort of gangs that are in Rotherham, Bradford and lots of other places in the country?
Just for you misunderstanding, what does she mean by that?
You know full well what I mean by that. It's all over the television. You know exactly what I mean by that. These gangs of people that are grooming young girls for sex. Do we actually have those in London?
I'm unclear, Chair, what is meant by the question. If you could spell it out, I can answer.
I've just spelt it out. Are you not listening? It's the sort of gangs that groom young girls at a young age for sex. Exactly how much clearer do you want me to be?
He's obviously trying to get her to say Muslim grooming gangs. She's desperately trying not to say Muslim grooming gangs. These are the kinds of conversations which end up disappearing up their own backside. It's kind of insane, isn't it?
Yeah, she's right, though. She's setting it out fairly clearly what she means. Are there gangs of people who target young people?
He's deliberately not understanding.
Yeah, Muslim or Asian. He's wanting her to say so that he
wants to
say
that she's racist.
Exactly, because that's what he will do. That's what he would do. He would then pander to his audience, which is to say the Tories are all racist, and that's why you have to vote for me.
Yeah.
I mean, when it comes to the issue with grooming gangs, though, I think in the north of England and the Midlands and elsewhere, it is difficult to separate the racial or cultural element from it. We shouldn't sort of shy away from that. It's not just that it might be that the perpetrators are from a certain background. It's that the victims are from another kind of background. It's that they were white working class. Right. And that's why they sort of came at the very bottom of the pile. London, I think, simply because it's not like other English cities at all in just the sheer scale of different communities that you have here now. I imagine that there is probably an awful lot of this thing that Sadiq Khan can't quite determine, which is grooming of young people, rape of young people by gangs of people. But I wonder whether or not it happens in the same way, because you just don't really have white working class people in parts of London anymore like you used to, because they have been forced out. Actually, if you want to know where the white working class of London is, they live in Essex now, because they can't afford to live in London.
Or in Kent or something.
Exactly. I imagine that there is an awful lot of sexual abuse that goes on in London, but it probably happens on slightly different parameters than it does elsewhere.
Right, because the question has been asked many times before. In fact, we had Susan Hall on not very long ago on this show, and people have said to me, isn't it unusual that despite all of this grooming gang activity, which appears to have been a national scale problem, it doesn't appear to have happened in London?
Yeah.
And that is a slight anomaly, it does seem to me.
But again, I suppose it's because, as I say, white working class people, not as many as there used to be. I mean, you just have to walk around. Actually, the majority of white people in London now appear to be middle class.
Well, not as many white people as there used to be.
Yeah, no, there are a minority
London is now a minority white city.
And the majority of those white people are middle class because they come from the university system to come and work. And that's why the white working classes have been forced out. They physically can't afford to live here anymore. But then when you have the actual working class communities, which are ethnic minority working communities, because they are ethnic minority, I think they probably tend to be a lot more tightly knit. If you sort of were to talk about, I don't know, the Somali or the Ghanaian or whatever it is, there are sort of slightly more, if you like, tighter bonds there, and therefore I suspect a lot more control, a lot more protection of young people. There are more eyes on them. So I suspect if it does happen, which it almost certainly does, very different ways in which it happens. There's no way, put it this way, that a social, group of social workers would dismiss the mass rape of, I don't know, young Jamaican children or something like that, because they would then be accused of racism. So they wouldn't allow that to happen at all. Whereas working class towns, Rotherham or what have you, it's easy to just dismiss white working class girls because they are literally at the bottom of the pile.
And they are literally not represented by anybody on the local council. They're not represented by their MPs.
They don't have a special interest sort of representative.
No, exactly right. Let's go back to the story we talked about a little bit earlier, which is the figure for those aged over 45 is 1 in 10, according to a report that's come out from Mental Health UK. This is a story that overworked young staff have been signed off with stress. Almost a third of young workers, that's people from 18 to 24 years of age, have been signed off with stress last year in the workplace. 1/3. I mean, that's a very large number, isn't it?
It's too high. It's unsustainable. And I mean, there's going to be a combination of things there. I mean, social media, phones, that sort of thing doesn't help. There's plenty of evidence to recognise that. Also, wages are not rising for young people at all. They are being suppressed. Again, a lot of that is to do with immigration. That's why we have it on the scale, deliberately to keep wages low.
And their wages aren't going to go up this year either, because the people that employ them are having to pay higher national insurance costs for them.
Which stops them getting on the housing ladder or anything.
It says here, nearly half of 18 to 24-year-olds said they were most likely to feel stressed because of regular unpaid overtime or taking on extra hours to deal with the increased cost of living. About half of employees of the same age reported stress due to a high workload or fears of job security and redundancy, according to the survey of more than 2,000 workers by YouGov. You know, I'm sorry, I don't remember anything different. You know, when I was between the ages of 18 and 24, I didn't have job security. I didn't have enough money. I would have liked to make more money. I did a couple of jobs at the same time in order to make enough money to go out and have a good time, and I just enjoyed myself. What the hell is going on here?
I think, as I say, I think partly because of migration on the scale that we've had, and it is ridiculous how many people we've ushered into this country in the last few years. That is going to have a massive downward effect on wages. That is going to mean that money obviously doesn't go as far, and there's greater competition for resources. So, you know, we're talking about the ability to get on the housing ladder, to pay off your loans, all that sort of thing. It's much more difficult. But there is something else in this, and that is to say that not all of the people who are signing themselves off work with mental health issues are in need of this stuff. It's a lot easier than it's ever been to get money off the state, ultimately. And given the economic situation, why wouldn't you do that?
It's also never been easier to sign yourself off with stress. As you said, doctors will more than happily say, oh yeah, you must be stressed out because, you know, you've got job insecurity. Well, you know, I mean, if I was an employer of many, many people, I think you'd be tearing your hair out at this point, wouldn't you? I mean,
you'd be signing yourself off with stress,
One of the Mental Health UK report findings is that basically the chief executive says many organisations still offer 20th century mental health support in a 21st century workplace. Well, what are they supposed to do? Are they supposed to have a sort of chill-out room that you're supposed to go and have a lie-down in? You're supposed to provide, you know, 24/7 masseurs so that if you need a massage, you can have one? It's called work.
It's something that does need to be addressed, is, you know, what exactly is a 21st century approach to this? Because actually it just seems to me that, as you say, it seems to be about, you know, there needs to be lots of counselling, lots of talking therapy, lots of this therapy, that therapy. Actually, what there never seems to be is a pathway to get somebody, you know, somebody goes into the doctor and they say, I'm stressed, I'm depressed, I'm anxious. They get given some tablets. And there's never a pathway to say, right, this is how you get off them. They're just left on these things, and then they have talking therapies or whatever, which actually is not always a very good way. If they just talk about their anxiety, it ends up perpetuating it.
But,
and then you get people on pills, off work, for long stretches of time with no real roadmap. If you've broken your leg, the doctor wouldn't go, well, here's some tablets and maybe it fixes itself, maybe it doesn't, who knows?
I mean, I had a go at somebody once for not doing their job when I was working for the Daily Mirror. He took the next day off with stress, he then took the next 3 months off with stress. And then when he was called in by the sort of, you know, the work and health and safety people and told, look, you can have another 3 months off with stress on full pay, but after that you'll be on half pay. Funnily enough, he came back to work, you know, and he wasn't so stressed out after all. So, I mean, I think the point about work is it's not supposed to be enjoyable.
No.
I mean, we're fortunate enough in what we do that we probably quite like it. I quite enjoy what I do. I've always enjoyed what I do because I like working. But if you know, if you don't like working, that doesn't mean that you're entitled to have some kind of compensation or time off for stress. Just get on with a bloody job.
It's true, and actually, you know, people are sold an idea, because people need to make money in the entertainment industry, but in TV and whatever, they're sold this idea that you can have it all. You can have the perfect job, you can have the perfect life balance. The majority of life does not go that way, never has.
And the business that we're in as well happens to be pretty insecure.
You
know, people get fired every single day because, you know, operations run out of money, you know, departments close down.
A government changes, a newspaper goes out of circulation.
TV stations close down, TV shows close down, radio stations close down. You know, if you want to get a steady job, you go and work for the civil service. Because then you can never get fired and you never have to even go into the office. It's brilliant.
We've gone about this the wrong way. That's what we should have done.
No, but you see, I would hate that. I actually like working. I
Yeah.
like doing things which are challenging. I don't like loafing about. I don't want to be told that I can work from home 3 days a week. I would hate it.
This is how people set up TikToks and stuff, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because they've got nothing to do, so they end up
Exactly.
dancing on camera for some Chinese app. That's why it's gone viral.
And I mean, but this generation of people between 18 and 25, that I, you know, two of my sons are in this generation, so I speak with some knowledge of it. You know, they seem to think that they're entitled to have a great work-life balance. Well, you can have a great work-life balance once you've earned it.
Yes.
Once you've worked in the business for long enough and become successful at it, then you can start taking nice holidays, then you can start driving nice cars, and then you can start spending some money on your girlfriend.
Yeah.
But, you know, you can't do it when you're 20 if you're only making 20 grand a year.
Yeah. My first job was in a factory working 12-hour nights.
Yeah.
You know, and that's probably the best thing that I could have done at that age, because it really does. There's no better way of beating into you.
Absolutely.
Literally. This is what life is like for most people.
And if you don't like it, then get a better job.
Exactly.
And keep moving until you're happy.
Yeah, great
You know,
motivator.
Telling people that you can take a load of time off because you're stressed out is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Sorry, I know you're going to call me old-fashioned 19th
I'm going to
century
take the rest of the
Victorian.
show off. This is really stressing.
Exactly
I'm
right.
very
Can you imagine if that happened? We'd never have you back again. And neither would Julia. Let's get a voice now from James on Mr. Keir Starmer.
Good morning, Mike. I see our great leader has swanned off again. Holiday number 26, I believe, under about a year. Cool, that's not bad going, Mike, is it? Blimey. To do a deal with Ukraine that we didn't vote for. Unbelievable, Mike. And also, Mike, that policeman has just been sacked for a tweet. 26 years of service for slagging those morons, those Just Stop Oil people that lay in the road. Cool, blimey, Mike. Anyway, mate, have a lovely weekend.
Thank you, James. Yeah, this is a guy called Ross Meredith from Merseyside Police who posted a series of what are described as derogatory and ableist comments on X in 2022 and 2023. Apparently compared Just Stop Oil supporters to special needs kids. And he used the retard word, which, of course, we're not supposed to use.
But it's making a comeback.
Sorry about that.
That's
the word he used. I'm just reporting it.
Did you read about this? This was in the, might not have read it, was in the Wall Street Journal, that they were, bankers on Wall Street were very delighted to know that Donald Trump won the election because, quote, it meant that they could use words like that again, like retard again, and that everything would be fine.
Right.
That, you know, the normal semblance of life is coming back and that the cancel culture is on the retreat.
Right. Is it okay if you pronounce it like Borat does? Retard?
Well, yeah.
Is that
okay? I completely forgot the existence of that
I don't
film.
think there's an Ofcom rule on that. Retard.
It's a. When did it go out? When was it? That, yeah, because at one point it was ubiquitous, and then it suddenly just disappeared one day, along with all the other fun in the world.
I know.
But now it's making a comeback. So
Apparently
watch this space.
But not for Ross Meredith,
No,
who's now
apparently
lost
not.
his job after 26 years. I mean, it is ridiculous, isn't it? It's 6:34. Coming up, we're going to talk about the latest problem for Sir Keir Starmer, and it's not Tulip Sadiq, it's not Sue Gray, it's not Lou Haig, it's not even Rachel Reeves. It's the Attorney General, and I think he's going to be the next one for the chop. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 6:37. I'm Mike Graham. Benedict Spencer's here. We're looking through the papers this morning to see what's going on. Good morning, says Margaret, currently in Tunisia. That clip you just showed goes to prove what an odious little man Sadiq Khan is. Why and how he's been given a knighthood is absolutely and utterly beyond me. And David says, morning, Mike, local inquiries will not be independent as they'll be carried out by those whom they are investigating. Nor will anyone be able to be compelled to give evidence. So it's another whitewash and will not get justice for the girls nor the nation. Absolutely appalling. I think there's a good point to be made there, but as I say, it feels to me like it's the first kind of step in the right direction, which will eventually become a flood of sort of, you know, activity, which will mean they will have to make it a national inquiry. But let's talk about another, you know, potential scandal which is on the horizon for Sir Keir Starmer. This came up this week because of the Jerry Adams scenario. You know, the Telegraph published it first, that basically Jerry Adams could be in line to get compensation now because the Labour government is going to make a change in the law in Northern Ireland, which will make it possible for people associated with terrorism to get some kind of compensation for being locked up. But what's sort of emerged from all of it is that the Attorney General, who's a guy by the name of Lord Hermer KC, who's another old mate of Keir Starmer's, it turns out was representing Jerry Adams in a High Court trial that goes to, a High Court case that goes to trial next year. And last year he represented him, and he was refusing under questioning to say how much money he made from that particular case and whether he was paid by Jerry Adams. It now turns out, according to the Times, that he's made 30,000 quid working for Jerry Adams. Yeah, it's a tricky one when it comes to the role of the Attorney General, because of course the average Attorney General is a lawyer at some point earlier on in their life, and I think we need to remember that lawyers, they do take difficult cases, and they should take difficult cases because people do deserve to be, you know, represented. Yes. But it is, of course, then very difficult when you're then finding yourself later on in a position of potentially to influence outcomes in government. Right. So it's a difficult one. I think politically it's very difficult because Lord Hermer seems to have been involved in several what I would say are politically quite tricky cases. He's very much, if you were to look at who he has represented, like Keir Starmer actually, he's represented far more people who you would call shall we say, on the other side of the government, and either, you know, terrorists or, shall we say, you know, politically difficult individuals. Yeah, and it's tricky because, as I say, tricky individuals, they do need to be represented, because this is why our justice system is actually one of the best in the world, is that we're not like, you know, the average African dictator where we just go, well, we're going to convict you first and then maybe have a show trial later. It's not so much about individuals representing potentially criminals or nasty individuals. I think it's a lot more to do with what it is that our legal system now allows those individuals to sue or claim or get away with. Increasingly, ours has gone down the direction of international human rights. That is sort of what's considered a lot more important. And people like Keir Starmer view the world through the framework of international human rights. This is the most important thing. And it sort of supersedes tricky little things like, I don't know, government or public opinion or anything national like that. Security.
Yeah, and that's, I think, what is... Again, not to mention it again, I know I go on about it a lot, the Chagos Islands was done on this basis, which is, this is what an international court says. And it doesn't matter what the national interest is, or indeed that we are the government and we can say, no, that is what these judges... It doesn't even matter what the people in Chagos actually want. When has that ever mattered?
No. And this is the same in Northern Ireland, you know, because they've changed, the law was deliberately constructed by the Tory government in order to make it impossible for people to claim compensation, and they're now changing that, while at the same time promising that, well, we'll do our very best to make sure that nobody gets compensation if they were terrorists. Yeah, but I think increasingly many members of the Labour Party, the legal profession, I think, are very out of step with what the general public... They absolutely are.
Yeah, this is it's gone in a direction of travel that I think is very different to what the public like or would expect from this. Now, I don't necessarily know whether or not Lord Hermer has done anything wrong. I don't think that he has necessarily done anything wrong legally.
But it's a conflict of interest problem.
Yeah,
that's
and
the problem.
And also, as we say, it's a conflict of interest problem around things that are particularly thorny. Jerry Adams, for an awful lot of people in this country, that only sort of evokes one or two memories, and none of them are good. And the other story, there's another story on the front page of the Telegraph, which is to do with the investigation into the activities of the SAS in Afghanistan. Again, it's that sort of thing. We're talking about potentially going after members of the armed forces who were deployed overseas fighting Al-Qaeda and the Taliban. That's not going to sit particularly well with people if it turns out, you played a role potentially in prosecuting those people, or then maybe overseeing part of an inquiry into that. So I think you might be right on this, which is that for political reasons, Lord Hermer's position might become less tenable. I
think it becomes untenable. And I'll tell you part of the reason why I say that is that yesterday we learned that when he was asked questions about this, he refused to answer them. Listen to what he answered.
It would have been better if he just
It would have been better if he'd just been honest, because we found out anyway, right? This is what he said when he was asked about whether he was paid anything to represent Jerry Adams. I can't recall, and even if I could recall, I'm not sure I would feel inclined to answer a question as to the basis on which I was paid by any given client.
I mean, you'd remember if you got 30k, wouldn't you?
Well, I think I would. I mean, as I said yesterday, you know, I can't remember where I went on holiday last year, and I'm pretty sure I went. I'm pretty sure I paid for the place that I stayed in. I'm pretty sure I wasn't given it by the former leader of Bangladesh. You know, these people think that we're idiots, right? They don't seem to understand that we see what they're doing. And if he was a lawyer and he was a highly paid silk and he did very well for himself, I wouldn't care less who he represented or who he was paid. But he's not. He's the Attorney General. He's a part of the government, and he is now, I think, compromised.
It's an embarrassment now to the government, but also, like, how bad were the majority of his clients that actually he doesn't remember Jerry Adams and 30k? I mean, that's the sort of thing that most people would remember, I think, kind of at the forefront of my mind.
So but basically, he's obscuring the truth.
Yes.
And I think we all know that.
Also, I think maybe he would have a little bit longer of a shelf life if it wasn't for the fact that Keir Starmer and his government are running things so badly. I think we've got to the stage now where they need scapegoats. They need to be seen to be getting rid of people, which is what happened to, obviously, Lou Hay, but, you know, Tulip Teague as well. She was resigned, but we all know what that means.
We know what that
very quickly, because it's simply there are too many things going wrong.
And Tulip Teague, of course, was got rid of, as you put it, 24 hours after Sir Keir Starmer gave his full confidence in her. As he's also given to Rachel Reeves.
Yes, it's a bit like being a Premier League manager. The second that the board says we've got full confidence,
so my prediction is this: Lord Hermer, KC, will not last until the end of February. How about that?
I think that's a fair assessment.
Yes, I think so. Let's get a voice note from Tim.
Morning. I think it's a brilliant TV show. It's the voice of Britain. It reflects how people are really feeling. I honestly don't believe that this government have a clue what they're doing. They seem to make the rules up every day, every minute of every day, to actually stifle freedom of speech in this country. We're not right-wing. We're just concerned citizens. We can see things going wrong. I actually believe if it wasn't for talkTV, we wouldn't have a voice.
You're very true. Tim, thank you for saying that. But we believe very much in giving people a voice. We give you a voice, whether it's a voice note, whether you ring up and talk to us, whether you send us a message. It's absolutely one of the few places where you can hear what's really going on. And I mean, I'm often staggered, you know, because just sometimes for my own amusement, I'll watch the news at 6 on the BBC, or I'll watch Sky breaking some news stories, and it doesn't bear any resemblance to reality. It doesn't bear any resemblance to what people are talking about, what people are thinking. The stories are reported in a very biased way, you know, and that's not really what we do.
I mean, the BBC, I can't with that anymore. I can't remember what it was the other day, something to do with Israel and Palestine was sort of the big news story that was leading the rest of the world. And at the top of the BBC's news website was something to do with a rapper called Stormzy getting, you know, his driving licence.
Yeah, because he was caught using his phone.
And you just, very often, it's a fun game that you can play, is what do you think the biggest story of the day is? And now let's go on the BBC's website and see how far at the top. No, but there's an awful lot of celebrity tattle. But the other thing that's happened as well, I mean, not that Channel 4 News was ever the sort of the bastion of impartiality, but Channel 4 News at the very least once upon a time carved itself out a bit of a niche talking about international conflicts and that sort of thing that people hadn't heard of. Now it is just an absolute snooze fest. It's just doesn't even bother to do that anymore. Everything is climate change and possibly racist. And you think, Wow, what a fantastic programme this is. A whole hour of just that.
Well, Sky's concentrating this morning on the Gaza ceasefire. They're interviewing some terrorists, the one looks at the moment. And at the top of the BBC, they're talking about climate change, funnily enough.
Yeah. I mean, at least there is a story in Gaza.
Temperature has risen by 1% over the course of time. We'll talk about the BBC actually coming up next, because the story that we did yesterday about a rapper who has been promoted by the BBC, by Radio 1 Extra, is still appearing on their shows, even though he was unveiled as making a profit out of killing a young man, Jimmy Mizzen, who was stabbed to death in 2008. He sings songs about it, he writes lyrics about stabbing people, and he's also, it now looks as though he's in some kind of trouble with the police, but we'll come back to that one. Coming up next, this is Morning Glory.
Poking at Jimmy, who punches were exchanged. The boys fell into this cake display. At that point, Fari's arrogance couldn't sort of let this go, so he grabbed a hot glass dish of sausages and hurled it at Jimmy. Tragically, it hit him in the neck and impacted, fragmented, and Jimmy, it severed his main arteries and he bled to death. Yeah. And it was a senseless, pointless murder. Yeah.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 10 minutes to 7. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 a.m, of course. 4 glorious hours of Morning Glory. Benedict Spencer's here. Let's get a voice note from Phil on Keir Starmer.
Morning, Mike. How many flights has this Keir Starmer made over the last 6-7 months? Because I'm pretty sure they don't want anyone making flights. That's why he's made this great big tax hike on it, yeah, for this green agenda. It's always a case of I'm all right, Jack, ain't it? Cheers, Mike. Great show. Thanks, mate.
Yeah, of course it's all right for him. Not only does he take lots and lots of flights, but he takes quite a few on private jets as well. He thinks that's quite a good thing to do. I think we're up to about 20 trips now abroad since he's been in office, and many, many more to come. He's in Poland today, by the way, for those of you who hadn't kept up. He was in Ukraine yesterday, promising to give away £4.5 billion of our money, taxpayers' money, to Ukraine, over 100 years of solitude, or whatever it is. He then is off to Poland today, and then of course Davos gets underway, so he'll be going there presumably after Poland. So absolutely ridiculous. Let's talk though about not only the Scouse accent supposedly sounding the most criminal, but let's talk about actual criminals, because you might remember an MP, a certain MP from the northwest of England, who yesterday pleaded guilty to assault. I think we can remember who it was by watching the video. I think we've got it right here. I mean, we shouldn't laugh, but that is actually Mike Amesbury, Labour MP, punching a man to the ground, who apparently, while doing so, said, "You will not threaten your MP again, will you, you effing soft lad?" Which I suppose you, having an association with Liverpool, will recognise as a phrase which is used quite regularly up there.
Yes, I think it's
soft lad.
Yes, soft lad. I think it's worth pointing out that he's technically not a Scouser. Being the MP for Runcorn, he is a wool, which is a derogatory term. You know, for people
That's
from
short for woolpacker.
Yeah, woollyback is what it is. But yeah, for people from the, if you like, the greater Lancashire area outside of Merseyside.
Yeah, okay.
Not a Scouser.
He's pleaded guilty to assault anyway.
Yeah, so there will almost certainly now be a by-election, which will be the first great test of just how popular Keir Starmer really is, in a place where Labour had a majority of, I think, about 14,000, quite large, but Reform second place. And, well, I mean, we've seen across the country, actually, it's one of those seats where they will be targeting, perhaps not very high.
And Reform are coming up on the rails pretty much everywhere, aren't they? I mean, I saw that Nigel Farage put out a tweet yesterday saying that the leader of the Conservatives, I think, in Glasgow City Council, of which there are not many, has just defected to Reform.
Yes.
And so they're hopeful that they can actually make some inroads into Scotland in the Scottish elections, parliamentary elections next year.
I wouldn't be surprised at all by that, simply because I think the whole point of the massive SNP vote was not, in fact, because everybody in Scotland is a massive nationalist and wants to be independent. I think it was simply a rejection of Westminster politics, and the SNP offered that. But the SNP have been dreadful. People think, you know, Labour have been bad, or the Tories were bad. Boy, you know, one of the few remits they have in Scotland is got a lot of islands. How do people get from A to B? The SNP attitude is just go, I don't know, find your own way.
Figure your own way out.
Basically. Yeah. So I wouldn't be at all surprised if Reform actually did surprisingly well in Scotland over the next couple of years.
I think that could well be. Story in the Telegraph, which we should gloss over, because Benedict doesn't really want to get associated with this, quite rightly. I don't mind, though, because I've already been in trouble in Liverpool before. The University of Cambridge has got a load of scientists looking at English accents, basically. People with a posh English accent are seen as least likely to commit most crimes. It just shows you what stereotypes will do. Scousers are deemed to be the most likely to exhibit criminal behaviour, followed by people from Bradford, Newcastle, and Londoners with a Cockney accent.
I mean, Londoners with a Cockney accent, I'm not sure there are very many of them left. I think that's very unfair as well.
It's hard to find.
I think people who speak like me are actually probably the most likely to, because you never see us coming, to be honest.
Exactly.
And we've got that confidence.
Also, you're more likely to commit fraud, probably, than maybe
almost certainly white-collar crime. But one thing I will say about having lived in Liverpool for about 5, 6 years, two things I'll say. Never had to lock my door whilst I was there. That wasn't a thing. And also, something that doesn't happen here, Merseyside police are really good at turning up to things. You know, people might say, oh, that's because there's more criminality going on. No, I kind of felt, when I was in Liverpool, they took it very seriously, because there is that stereotype about, you know, life up there. Whereas I tell you what, you won't see a police officer in London for love nor money. So if there is a lot of Cockney-based theft and criminality going on, well, I wouldn't know about that, neither would the police, because they aren't going to turn up to it.
Absolutely right. Let's have a look at what happened overnight, because there's a new sort of space race going on. This is the billionaire space race, because now Jeff Bezos has decided he, like Elon Musk, wants to send rockets up into the outer limits of the universe. And last night, Elon's successful booster capture happened, even though his rocket actually failed. Let's have a look at this.
Booster now hovering as it aligns with the tower for catch. Booster coming in. Get ready for that boom, Kate.
Down to 3 engines.
Booster ready for shutdown. Megazord has caught the booster.
The way that we're now looking at that, and because we're used to it, we're going, yeah, there he goes again, capturing a rocket. But it's quite remarkable, isn't it?
The sheer physics of it, quite literally, are unbelievable.
Yeah.
And I think I understand why Elon Musk sort of doesn't, he rubs people up the wrong way in the UK, his character, all that sort of thing. He's very critical of politicians. He behaves in a way that actually the average British person simply isn't used to, because he's an American / South African,
right.
And that's in his nature. But the things that his companies are achieving, whether or not you like the man, he is going to determine a great deal of the trajectory of the West in the next couple of years. And Jeff Bezos as well, not quite to the same extent, but this is what they're doing. They're putting their money into these things,
right.
And they are achieving incredible things.
And yet still, there are people in this country who call Elon Musk a moron. Because he doesn't know what he's talking about. And you kind of go,
it's unbelievable.
You're an anonymous account on Twitter, which he's actually making money from because you're on it.
Yeah.
And you're calling him a moron. He's just sent rockets up into space. The rocket unfortunately exploded, actually, when it got into space. But, he knows that that's, one of those things that can happen.
Yeah.
But he's doing it on a sort of regular basis. About twice a week he's sending rockets up.
There's spectacular footage of the rocket exploding over, I think it's Turks and Caicos or something like that. If you can find that, that's very good for people to watch. It looks spectacular. But yeah, he is doing incredible things. Bezos is doing incredible things at a slightly slower pace, but also in the fields of AI and things like that. And as I say, it's this kind of can-do attitude. He does literally say, one of his mantras is, you can just do things, you can just say things.
Just do them,
this is how you get progress. Whereas in this country, of course, progress, ambition, money,
that is not acceptable. In this country, we're full of people who tell you what you can't do. They don't tell you what you can do. They don't. And this is the problem, I think, in schools. They tell people what they can't do. They don't tell people the world is actually your oyster, and you can go and do whatever you like.
If you're ambitious. I mean, the thing that I thought was most telling was this AI announcement that Starmer made earlier on this week. AI is something, obviously, that Musk and all of these Silicon Valley tech bros are very much at the forefront of, and they are looking at how can we use AI to cure all of these diseases, get us to the Kuiper Belt, all of these sorts of things. And what did we say? Oh, well, we're going to use it to identify potholes, which have already been identified by members of the public, but we'll use it to identify.
And we're going to help you to make an appointment with your doctor using AI.
We'll streamline your GP
doctor's actually off. You can't actually see him, but you can make the appointment.
That's the limits of our ambition compared to people like this. And I'm sorry, if he does rub you up the wrong way, I want to see more of this.
Yes, absolutely right. One final one, we've only got about a minute left. Michelle Obama makes the front pages this morning. Mystery of Michelle, it says on the front page of the Telegraph. Missing Michelle. She's going to miss Donald Trump's inauguration on Monday. Spokesman giving no reason for her absence. The former First Lady was last seen with her husband, Barack, back in August. She also skipped Jimmy Carter's funeral. There's rumours that he's been seen with Jennifer Aniston. I mean, it's quite a story, this, if it turns out to be true.
I tell you what, if finally Barack Obama has become interesting and decided, do you know what, I'm going to use my status as an ex-president to live a certain kind of life. I'll respect him a lot more for that than, say, his foreign policy.
Yes.
But also, frankly...
Which was pretty useless.
Yeah, I'm not surprised that Michelle Obama wouldn't want to go to Donald Trump's inauguration. That must be a very humbling experience for every Democrat who's going to be there, that he got in again.
Of course, it won't be a humbling experience for Keir Starmer because he hasn't been invited. But never mind.
But he's in Eastern Europe.
But the lefties are all up in arms because I suggested that was a snub to Britain, and they were like, no British Prime Minister has ever been invited. Yeah, but he's invited a load of world leaders. There we go. This is Morning Glory. Benedict, thank you very much indeed. We'll be back with more after this.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 2 minutes past 7. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until, of course, 10 o'clock. It is Friday and we have reached the end of yet another pretty tumultuous week in the dangerous world of international politics. We've got just a few days to go until Donald Trump takes over as the 47th President of the United States of America. It's literally Joe Biden's last weekend running the free world. All through the week he's been making one gaffe after another. He's now convinced himself that he alone is responsible for finding peace in the Middle East. Of course, everybody else knows that it was actually Donald Trump's intervention that made it happen. With all good luck and with all sails behind coming with a strong wind, the following wind, shall we say, it looks as though the hostages will be released on Sunday. It looks as though the last-minute hitches that Hamas appear to be throwing down in front of the deal yesterday have been sorted out. Benjamin Netanyahu says they will be going ahead with the peace deal, so fingers crossed everybody gets released and everyone who is still alive manages to make it back to see their loved ones. This morning, Labour have been blasted over what's being described as a toothless grooming probe. What they've done, basically, thanks to Yvette Cooper, is set up a whole load of regional probes, a whole load of local probes and local inquiries, which don't have the ability to compel anybody to actually appear before them. So many people are not too happy about that. I'm going to say, actually, I think it's a step in the right direction, and I think it will eventually drag the government, which doesn't want to admit that they got it wrong, into doing a full-blown, proper national inquiry. We'll speak to Alan Tolhurst about it, reporter at Politics Home, chief reporter at Politics Home, we should say. BP is going to lose 4,700 jobs. Why? Because they're making a green transition. This is a company that drills for oil and gas, but they're going to stop drilling for oil and gas, and as a result, the company's going down the toilet. How unsurprising is that? Also, Rachel Reeves on the front page of the Telegraph saying, "I will not let them get me down." She says she's got the absolute virility of Margaret Thatcher. She's got the stability of Margaret Thatcher. She's got the incredible kind of stamina of Margaret Thatcher. I'm not so sure she's not slightly overselling herself, but there we are. Also, the Attorney General now is a new conflict of interest row. Front page of the Times saying that he made £30,000 working for Jerry Adams, of all people, which is not going down too well in the corridors of power. If you've forgotten how to get in touch, here's how you do it.
Hi Mike, Jill from Northampton here. Love waking up with you at 6 o'clock on my TV.
Morning Mike. Well, I'd like to apologise first of all. I slept in, missed 8 minutes of your show, but it's my day off anyway.
Just listening to you guys going through the latest news and headlines, I just despair.
Just regarding Wish You Were Here, Keir, I see he's gone away again.
Wish you were here, Keir. Never here, Keir. He has gone away again. He was in Ukraine yesterday pledging, believe it or not, £4.5 billion of our money to Ukraine while signing a 100-year partnership deal, the like of which nobody's ever seen. The reason nobody's ever seen it is he's never told us what he was going to do. Today he's in Poland, and who knows what he's going to do there, but he says he's going to be holding talks on a new security pact to protect the UK's national security, because he wants to protect us from Russian aggression, people smuggling and combat in misinformation and cyber threats. So he's off in Poland, and then he's going to go to Davos, I presume, so we might not see him for a while. Amazing what you can do when you don't get invited to Donald Trump's inauguration, but there we are. 6 minutes past 7, this is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. One from Stuart in Perthshire here. He says, "Morning, Mike. I'm afraid I missed the first 10 minutes of your show today, as I'm still tired after having a powerful sedative yesterday. It wasn't delivered by a doctor, but by Kemi Badenoch. Honestly, Mike, she should have just made it her resignation speech." Well, we've got a bit of Kemi Badenoch, I think. Shall we have a listen to what she had to say yesterday?
And no ifs, no buts. We simply cannot take all the millions of people who want to come here from elsewhere. Our country is our home. It is not a hotel. If people arriving don't want to integrate into British culture, they shouldn't be here.
Well, she did get a big round of applause, but yeah, it's not exactly setting the heather alight, is it? Let's talk to Alan Tolhurst, chief reporter at Politics Home. Alan, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike.
Happy Friday. You know, the subject just doesn't go away, does it? We still see Keir Starmer in Poland today. He's going to be talking to them about tackling people smuggling gangs. It's a Europe-wide problem. what is Kemi Badenoch going to offer by way of some kind of, a poison pill to stop people from coming? Because, of course, the Tories didn't stop them from coming all the time they were in. I mean, funnily enough, I was listening to one of the shows on Talk last night. I think it was Kevin O'Sullivan's show. And as recently as something like 2018, the number of people who came across the channel in small boats was something like 25. I mean, it was tiny.
Yeah.
And then it was a couple of hundred, and then it suddenly ballooned into what it is now, and nobody seems to know what to do about it.
Right, yeah, and it was a curious speech by Kemi Badenoch, because obviously, when you're leader of the opposition, your whole job is to try and drag attention away from the government and onto you,
right.
And you have to kind of say what it is that you would do, and she's kind of made it clear that she's not going to come up with specific policies for quite a long time, perhaps not even next year, but until the year after. So therefore, she drags sort of like the lobby to the speech and sort of criticises the government, but then doesn't really have any policies of her own. And like you say, certainly not this kind of magic bullet that's going to solve things. And it was kind of a rehash, really. I mean, she would not thank me for saying this, but a bit of kind of continuity Sunakism, really, kind of a rehash of the arguments that the Tories were making at the 2024 general election. And she didn't really offer any sort of solutions, just criticism. And I think that's a sort of opposition policy that gets people riled up, really.
Well, yeah. I mean, I suppose on the one hand you've got Kemi Badenoch who doesn't say very much of anything, and then you've got Robert Jenrick, who's often accused of going too far and saying things which are, deliberately kind of incendiary and might be considered to be, borderline problematic, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, she's basically saying migrants who refuse to embrace British culture should find somewhere else to live. Well, fine, but how do you even define that, and what does that mean, and how do you make them find somewhere else to live if they're already here?
Right, what's the specific test for not integrating and stuff? And is there a sliding scale? Is there a point system?
Yeah.
Can you appeal? Can you take the test again? And what happens? Is it a one-time thing? You get immediately deported, or would you go to some halfway house?
And apparently there is a test. I mean, I was talking to some people yesterday about this, and people were ringing in. Lots of people messaged us as well. Many of them had taken the test because we had a commentator on who said the test was really difficult. It's actually not particularly difficult, apparently, and many people pass it quite happily with flying colours, and not that many people fail it. So yeah, apparently there already is a test, and once you've passed it, you're in.
Right, yeah, exactly. So it's a strange thing, and I think that's I think both the government are finding this at the moment, that there isn't kind of a silver bullet to fixing this. You can't just say we're going to smash the gangs and actually prevent people from being able to come across the channel in the same way the previous government talked about it. They obviously came up with a deterrent system that didn't seem to it wasn't seem to be deterring people before it got going. So therefore, I think it's very difficult for both sides to come up with something that they know is going to work, because both sides have had a go at it and they've not managed to bring the numbers down. But certainly with Badenoch, it was this speech that was meant to be kind of diagnosing all of the kind of the problems, but it just seemed like kind of a little bit impotent, really, because it didn't have on the back of it an alternative to what the government is doing.
I mean, certainly people would agree, I suspect, if we asked them, with what she said about our country is our home, it is not a hotel. But one of the things that people get really wound up about is the fact that there are many hotels occupied by many illegal migrants who are getting paid to be here, who are getting shelter, who are getting food, who are getting the ability to live a life which many other people can't live, and they're not being deported, even if they end up finding themselves on the wrong side of an asylum claim. And so this government, which keeps talking about wanting to deport more people, is also failing at that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it was under the Conservatives that that exponential use of hotels, spiraled up. I think by the time the Tories left office, it was something like £6 to £8 million a day being used on hotels, and so therefore, this government obviously inherited that and has been trying to bring it down. Instead, they've ended up having to open some new hotels in places like Altrincham, where I grew up. There's been a massive stink about the one main hotel in that town being opened and used for this purpose. But yeah, I think one of the main problems, I've spoken to people who work in the Home Office, is that processing is so slow, to be able to get people back. Places like Greece that obviously have a similar issue with small boat crossings, their officers there, they process something like 50-60 claims a week. Many of them they deny people. I think in the UK, some people, they process something like 1 or 2 claims
I know,
a week.
it's bonkers, isn't it?
So therefore, if you've got all thousands of people coming over, there is inevitably going to be this backlog, and you have to find somewhere to put them. We've been very slow at building sort of temporary accommodation, all that kind of stuff, so therefore the only place you can use is hotels, and we end up in this terrible situation where people are just waiting waiting around, not having their case decided either way.
No, exactly right. Let's move on to Sir Keir Starmer. He was off in Ukraine yesterday, basically promising to give them £4.5 billion. I mean, for a man who claims not to have any money, he's quite profligate with some of it whenever he goes to somewhere like Ukraine. We signed a new 100-year deal with them, some kind of partnership, which nobody knew about until he went there. You know, some people yesterday on this show were showing signs of dismay that he might have actually mentioned at some point in the past month or so that he was going to enter into this partnership and he was going to guarantee them a whole bunch of money, because surely we should be able to know about that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and I'm sure he's going to get a stout ticking off from Sir Lindsay Hoyle, the Commons Speaker, for not announcing this in the chamber, in the House of Commons before it was announced. But I think clearly it's part of kind of a coordinated decision by kind of Western allies that aren't America to try and kind of keep putting this support in, because there is a fear, I think, that when Donald Trump becomes president next week, that he will put pressure on Ukraine and Zelensky to come up with some sort of settlement with Russia. He's talked about wanting to end the war in a single day. So I think that Western allies are trying to add a lot of support to try and steady kind of Zelensky's hand, so that he isn't forced into making a kind of a settlement that's not in Ukraine's interest.
No, quite. And today's in Poland, as I say, talking about a great many things, including sort of, you know, Western Europe security, and then he'll presumably go to Davos, so he won't be back for a while, will he?
No.
Yeah, he's a tour of Europe. Very nice too.
Yeah, he's racking up the air miles, certainly. If he needs his Avios points, I think it'll be...
I don't know if he's taken his... judging by the way he was dressed yesterday, I presume he's taking his snowboard to go snowboarding when he gets to...
Well, if you're going to go to Davos, Mike, you've got to have the full experience, haven't you? If you're going to get to that inner circle in Davos, you've got to pay the £1,000 and thousands and go skiing, certainly, as well. Yeah, it's people always complain about being Prime Minister, how it's such a terrible job. You know, there are some benefits, I'm sure.
It's really not that bad. I'll tell you what I find interesting today. The most interesting story for me this morning is all about Lord Hermer KC, the Attorney General, because he's becoming quite a controversial figure. You know, he came into the sort of firmament, if you like, I think a few weeks ago, maybe back end of last year, because of some of the people that he'd represented in his private law practice, who might have been considered to be sort of, you know, borderline, not welcome in this country sort of people. We've now got him representing Gerry Adams, and he was asked a question the other day as to how much he was paid by Gerry Adams, and he rather stupidly made out that he couldn't remember, didn't know. Even if I did know, I'm not sure I would tell you. But he's obviously front and centre of this new reframing of the law in Northern Ireland, which may make it possible for Gerry Adams to claim compensation. It now turns out, according to the Times this morning, that he was paid £30,000 for representing Gerry Adams last year.
Yeah, and he doesn't really talk about how exactly he was paid. It is very interesting, and I suppose I think that's one of the difficulties in if you hire a very experienced, long-standing lawyer, if you look through their client list, you will inevitably, that's the job of these kind of high-powered cases, is to represent all sorts of different people, but now to make him kind of a poacher turned gamekeeper by now making the Attorney General, I think there's going to be a fair few kind of skeletons in his closet. I think there's going to be a few more stories about this. He's talked about the stuff around the Afghanistan inquiry, that very tainted kind of legal process that happened as well. So yeah, I think there's going to be some definitely some tricky questions. And clearly as a lawyer, people, you represent all sorts of different people. That's not really meant to kind of give firm or favour.
You do, but I mean, if you look through his list of clients, you don't find any right wingers. Funnily enough, you just find a load of sort of revolutionaries and people linked to terrorist groups. But I wonder
their money is exactly the same as anyone else's. Mike,
well, it is, but I mean, as I say, if he had chosen sort of equally, that would be one thing. But he doesn't seem to have done, a bit like Keir Starmer's own law career, in which he represented far more people who you might consider to be on the sort of anti-British side of the divide than anything else. But I wonder, given the week that Starmer has had, where he's lost Tulip Sadiq, the third woman who's had to leave his government, whether this guy might be the next one to fall on his sword, because I think this is one of those sort of slow burn scandals that while it may not be necessarily untenable, just doesn't look very good.
No, it doesn't. I think it's less likely to come up because the fact that the Attorney General is although it's a cabinet level position, is pretty much the most kind of obscure of it. I think, and also as well, because he's not an MP, he's a member of the House of Lords. I think it's not necessarily quite the same. But yeah, I think that there will probably be a drip of these kind of stories. As I said, when you go through a career, 30, 40 plus year career of a lawyer, there's going to be probably a fair few more stories. I'm sure papers like the Times and others will be having their legal correspondents digging through every kind of clipping they've ever had that mentions him, and I think there'll probably be a few more stories as we go into next week.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, Mike Amesbury pleaded guilty yesterday to assault up in court in the north of England. The Runcorn and Helsby MP said it's nothing. He said basically, you will not threaten your MP again, will you? You effing soft lad, which is a very Liverpudlian sort of thing to say. But basically, I assume there's going to have to be a by-election now, isn't there?
Well, interestingly, because a recall petition is only triggered in a particular set of circumstances. So if he was to be given a custodial sentence or a suspended sentence, then a recall petition could be triggered. Yeah. Obviously, if he was, I think he was given a sentence of like a year, then it would automatically, he would just be vacated as an MP and there would be an automatic by-election. Right. But I think the fact is that he pleaded guilty early. It's a first offence. It's a single charge.
Surely he should face the full force of the law, shouldn't he?
He does, but I think if you listen to what the judge said yesterday, the judge basically said that the full spectrum of sentencing options are still on the table, which I think start at a community order and go up to a custodial sentence. So I think there is still a chance that he might end up getting a community order. But the fact that he's been dropped by Labour, the whip was suspended when he admitted that when this first came out. Right. He's obviously not going to be let back in as a Labour MP. He may decide to step down, but I do think
he shouldn't be allowed to be an MP after this, surely to God.
Well, look, I mean, punching a constituent, it didn't do John Prescott's career at any harm.
Well, no, but John Prescott was attacked by the guy before he punched him. As far as we know, this guy was not attacked by the guy. He was having an argument with him, which is completely different. And he's also pleaded guilty to assault, which John Prescott never did.
No, exactly. I think it's very unlikely that Amesbury's career will continue much beyond this, but we'll have to wait until the sentencing to know exactly kind of the particular mechanism that will be used. Reform are kind of, chomping at the bit, essentially, to get involved in this. Obviously, they've been already campaigning up there. I think they were a long way behind Labour at the election last year, but obviously they'll see this as a big opportunity to be able to take another scalp from Labour, given everything else that's been going on.
I think so. Absolutely. Good to talk to you, Alan. Thank you very much indeed. Alan Tolhurst there. Wouldn't it be extraordinary if this man, this so-called Labour MP, former Labour MP, Mike Amesbury, did not get fired from his job at the Houses of Parliament? This is a bloke who punched a constituency repeatedly in the face, even after he was on the ground, right? And started attacking him for no apparent reason, other than the fact that he didn't like what the guy was saying. Now, the idea that he will not face the full force of the law after what we saw last summer, after those riots, when Keir Starmer wanted to lock everybody up, even though it was a first offence, even though there was no violence involved, even though some Facebook posts were made, is absolutely another indication of two-tier justice for two-tier Keir. Two-tier, never here, wish you weren't here, Keir. Two-tier justice. I'm sorry. It shouldn't be going on. This guy should be out of a job. Let's get a voice note from Steve on Sadiq Khan.
Hi Mike, great show as usual. Keep up the good work. I've been listening to Shaheen Khan's questions and his answers. Well, he didn't answer one question. He's an absolute disgrace. If people are watching him from another country, they must be thinking, is he actually for England and the UK and London, or is he for everybody else? He couldn't even answer what a grooming gang was. Absolute shocking. Sooner the better he leaves, the better. Keep up the good work. Bye.
Steve on Sadiq Khan, thank you very much indeed. I couldn't agree more. The sooner Sadiq Khan leaves London, gets the hell out, the better everything will be. The better the crime rate will be, the better the traffic will be, the better the council tax will be, and all of that. 0344 499 1000 is the number. It's 21 minutes past 7. Coming up, we're going to talk about what's going on in Israel today and whether the hostages will in fact be released this weekend.
that would allow the hostages, or a good proportion of the hostages, to be released and to have the actual military conflict ceasing for the period ahead. So far as this blip you've just been reporting is concerned, I wouldn't put too much concern on that. I mean, I may be utterly wrong, but I think this is what often happens at these last moments, that one side or the other tries to, in the pressure of events, to try to extract some further concession.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock. Time now to go and speak to the Special Envoy for the Israeli Foreign Ministry and Jerusalem's former Deputy Mayor, a very good friend of this show's as well, Fleur Hassan Nahum. Fleur, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Thanks very much for joining us. It looked as though there was a little bit of a hiccup yesterday in the deal that had been brokered by all manner of different people. Benjamin Netanyahu said that Hamas were trying to blackmail Israel at the final doorway to the release of the hostages, but it would appear that that's all been smoothed out, has it?
Yes, this is their playbook, Mike. When they've cut a deal, right at the end, they want to just try and bring something in. And let me tell you what this was that was holding up the deal. Israel has a right of veto of which prisoners get released. Now, the prisoner they were fighting over, this is the quibble, was a terrorist who killed a family of 5, including a baby in his crib, was decapitated in the bed. This was a number of years ago. And this is the terrorist that they wanted released, and this is what the last-minute quibbles were about.
OK. So has that been resolved peacefully, I suppose you might say, meaning that he won't be released?
Apparently. And so what we're looking at is one-day delay. The cabinet will meet tomorrow evening to approve it. And on Monday, I think, will be hopefully the first hostages coming home. Let's pray.
Which will be a very, very welcome sight, I think, for everybody in the civilised world. It's still not really clear, is it, who is actually alive and who isn't?
No, and that's part of the psychological torture that they're doing. So they're saying that they're releasing 33 hostages over 44 days. Imagine, they're drip feeding the hostages home. Look how cruel this whole thing is. And apparently out of the 33, we don't know how many are alive. They're saying the majority. Some people are claiming that it's 23 that are alive. But meanwhile, there's been a leak of the names of the hostages. Imagine those family members. They see their names of their loved ones, and then they don't know if they're alive or dead. This is what we're going through right now.
It's just awful, isn't it? And as far as the days after that, I suppose, I mean, you say there's going to be over a period of time that they release the hostages, so I guess that helps to guarantee the ceasefire, does it?
Well, everything is exactly. So I don't know whose side it's guaranteeing, but basically they're drip releasing the hostages in order to buy quiet. So that they can continue to, I don't know, organize themselves again. This is the problem. You're dealing with terrorists here. And it's a very difficult deal. It's a very difficult deal because our hearts say something and our brains are saying something else.
Of course. Because, of course, everybody wants the hostages released, but at the same time, Benjamin Netanyahu has been very clear he can't allow Hamas to ever commit the same atrocity again as they did on October the 7th. They need to be completely and utterly destroyed. And Gaza somehow needs to rebuild itself without Hamas as their leadership.
Absolutely, for the good of the people of Gaza, right? Not just Israel.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've been saying all along, you know, the whatever happened in Gaza is down to Hamas. Everything is down to Hamas, you know.
Well, absolutely. They started the whole thing, and their clear aims are the destruction of Israel. They're not talking about a peaceful solution. They want the destruction of Israel. They make no bones about it. And when people are telling you that they want to kill you, we should begin to believe them.
And what sort of hope can we have that the young generation who are growing up in Gaza will not feel that way? Because there's still, I mean, I saw pictures yesterday on Twitter, on X, of young kids being taught how to use machine guns, being taught how to hate Jews, being taught how to want to do away with Israel as an entity. You know, how do you change that?
We need to do a very serious de-radicalization, and unfortunately it's not going to be Israel that's going to be able to do it. And this is where I have hope in the Abraham Accords countries, because the Emirates, the United Arab Emirates, and Saudi to a certain extent, have done a lot of de-radicalization of Islamic fundamentalism. I mean, just to tell you, Mike, that Al Jazeera is illegal in these countries, and yet in the West it runs free, you know, spreading out poison. And so we need to take this seriously, and we need to make sure that the UN stop funding a curriculum based on hatred.
Yeah, and we need to stop things like UNRWA from making out that they are completely innocent, neutral bodies, right?
They're part of the problem.
Yeah.
They're part of the problem.
Absolutely. Well, we wish you luck, Fleur. I know it's going to be a difficult
Mike.
weekend, but thank you very much, Fleur San-Nahum, Special Envoy for the Israeli Foreign Ministry and Jerusalem's former Deputy Mayor. A little bit of breaking news coming for you. Another blow to growth, it would seem, after Rachel Reeves yesterday was kind of suggesting that, things aren't as bad as they could be, but it's all down to the Tories. The volume of retail sales, which is a measure of the quantity of goods and services bought, fell by 0.3% in December. All of these things are fairly small. You know, we saw 2 days ago inflation falling by 0.1%. This is the retail sales falling by 0.3%, which is not good. We also saw yesterday, I think that there was some kind of minor look that something had gone up by 0.1% after having gone down by 0.1%. So basically the economy is flatlining. You know, this was supposed to be a busy period for retail sales. It's the month of Christmas, so you would expect December retail sales to be up, wouldn't you? But in fact, they're down 0.3%. GDP pretty much flat. Inflation still supposedly at 2.5%. I think it's a lot higher than that, but we will, of course, continue to let you know how that all goes. Let's get a voice note from Sam.
Good morning, Talk Team. I just want to thank this radio/TV station for being not only allowing the voice of the people, speaking on behalf of the people, telling us news that is not sort of smothered up, you know, like almost the opposite to the biased broadcasting corporation. It keeps our sanity. You are the ambassadors of the media, of the ordinary man and woman in this country, of all races and, you know, from all backgrounds. It's just, thank you. It's just, you allow us, even just listening to you, to let off steam. So thank you.
Sam, what a very nice message to get on a Friday. We'll reward you with some gaffes, because, you know, we don't always get everything right. So we record the things that we don't get right. We put them out for you. That's really sweet, though. It's true. We do try very hard here at Talk to bring you the unfiltered news, because, quite frankly, nobody else does that. There is no other organisation on the planet that does it. We do it specifically because we've been doing it for a long time. We did it during COVID. We were the first people to question whether COVID and the lockdown was actually something sensible to do. We also questioned whether people should have to wear masks and walk around in public 1 metre away from one another. We also questioned whether sitting down in a pub at a table of 6 people was better than sitting down at a table of 10. If there were 6 tables there and there were 60 of you, it didn't really matter which way you did it. We also asked the question about whether there was a necessity to make everybody work from home. We also asked whether it was a necessity to have briefings every single day from Downing Street, where lies were told, where graphs were made up, where figures were completely and utterly invented to try and frighten people. We asked all those questions. Nobody else did. Now, of course, we've got the COVID inquiry. Now, of course, we've got people asking questions about the vaccines. And now we've got even the government suggesting they're going to pay compensation to people when we were saying all these things years ago and being castigated for it by the government. In some cases, being reported by MPs to various, incendiary organisations. I mean, incredible. But we've been doing it for a long time, so we're pretty good at it. But thank you. We still appreciate it when you say so. Buongiorno, Mike, says Stuart. I'm messaging you from Metallica in Italy this morning, and I was very lucky to have a job I loved when leaving school in 1977 in a sewing factory. Loved every minute of it, and it set me up for life without me even thinking about it, and I hated having time off for any reason. Exactly right. This is on the story that a third of young people between the ages of 18 and 24 have taken time off for stress in the past year. Lee from Hampshire says, "Morning, Mike. I'm signed off sick from work at the moment. Not from stress, though, but I'm getting stressed not being able to do anything." Well, this is it. People are designed to go to work, whether you like it or not, whether you want a good work-life balance. The fact is, you don't deserve to have a good work-life balance until you've worked for a while. You know, you don't deserve to get everything you want just because you want it. You know, that's the spoiled generation that we seem to have raised in this nation. So let's get a grip. Send your sons and daughters out to work. Teach them a work ethic. Teach them that if they work hard, they'll be rewarded. And forget everything else. And then they will be happy and they will be successful. 7:34.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:36. Here's one from Paul who says, "Never hear Keir in Davos. Keir Starmer cuddling up to the WEF and Schwab is not going to end well for the UK. Well, don't forget, he's in Poland first. You know, he was in Ukraine yesterday, Poland today. It's like he's on tour with a band or something, maybe New Order. He does look like a member of New Order, as we pointed out yesterday. We're going to speak to Sir Geoffrey Clifton-Brown very shortly, Conservative from the North Cotswolds. First, though, let's get a gaff, because it's Friday. You know, we like to try and keep your spirits up. So here's a gaff from Julia Hartley-Brewer. Keir, what do you make of Keir Starmer's outfit? What's he dressed as? He looks like a member of New Order.
Do you know what I love is, though, is that you just know that there's so much thought will have gone into it.
I know.
I can't wear a shirt and a tie.
No, because he's in a war zone.
Casual, but
except there are two people.
Camouflage.
But there are two people to his right who are wearing proper, you know, shirt and tie suit. You know.
It shouldn't be doesn't matter. What amazes me is that he's been Prime Minister 6 months. He's visited every other godforsaken country in the world. But what? Not Ukraine.
It's not really a gaff, that, to be fair. I mean, she's just doing her own version of a Starmer impression, which we all do. God knows what he's doing in Poland. I don't know if Sir Geoffrey knows. So, Geoffrey Clifton-Brown, very good morning to you, sir.
Good morning, Mike. Good to be back on your programme.
Absolutely. Good to see you. Plenty to talk about this morning. I mean, Starmer's on his travels. You know, he was in Ukraine yesterday. Despite the fact that we haven't got any money, he seems to have found $4.5 billion to give them over the course of the next few years to help their fight against Russia and also to rebuild the country. Some of my viewers and listeners are slightly dismayed as to where he's found the money from.
Well, it was extraordinary. He signed a 100-year deal.
Right.
I mean, God knows what we'll all be doing in 100 years. I don't know.
Well, luckily we won't be here to see it, I'm afraid. I wonder what state the roads will be in by then, because they'll probably be so bad that nobody will be able to drive anything other than a sort of tractor on them. Basically, England's roads are now called a national embarrassment, aren't they?
They are. I'm chairman of the Public Accounts Committee, and we've introduced a report this week on the state of our roads. That's our local roads, which is 183,000 miles, 98% of all our roads. And what the extraordinary thing is that the government doesn't really seem to know what the state of our roads are. They say the state is stable. You and I and every one of your listeners who travels on the road, whether we drive a car or public transport or a bike or whatever, we know they're getting worse. And so that's the first thing, is to try and the government to wake up and actually work out what the state of our roads are.
Yeah. Well, when is somebody going to do that? Because we keep hearing that they're promising all sorts of billions to repair the potholes. We're now told, I think it was this week, that 579 million is the cost to motorists to repair their own cars after going in and out of potholes continually over the past year. And I mean, nothing seems to be being done. I mean, where I live in London, it's not too bad, but in other parts of London there are roads which have never been repaired properly for absolutely years and years and years. And there are some roads which get closed every so often for no good reason. People dig them up and nobody knows why, and then when they reopen they're even more riddled with bumps and speed bumps and and holes and all the rest of it than they ever were.
Well, the roads in London might be one thing, but if you get outside London, they're even worse. The thing to do is to make sure that the government is going to fund local authorities properly to repair these roads, rather than what's happening at the moment. They're having to scrimp and save. They fill in the potholes as best they can. Some do a good job, some don't. But I think what will infuriate your listeners in a number of areas of the country is they put in the tarmac into these potholes, and 2 or 3 months later they come out again because they haven't done a proper job.
Right.
So there's a number of things that need to happen. They need to be funded properly. The government spends about $1 billion on our roads each year, which is not enough. They need to simplify the way the funding is. They give it in 12 different pots at the moment, and they need to make it very clear to local authorities what the latest technology is, so that local authorities are using the best possible technology. And they need to really look at how these roads can be brought up to standard. And there is this huge backlog now. They think it's 8 to 12 billion. The industry thinks it's 15 billion. So, there is a real problem with our roads.
Whenever I speak to people about this, they always say to me, but the government collects so much money from us on roads, for example. The road tax keeps going up. Electric car drivers are now going to be paying road tax as well. I mean, 40 billion, I think, was the last estimate I was told, that is collected every single year. We've got places like Transport for London in London, where they collect hundreds of millions of pounds every year in ULEZ fines, in parking fines. Every single council in Britain is absolutely lording it up with millions and millions of pounds, and yet the roads get worse. Why don't they spend some of that money on the bleeding roads?
Well, the thing is that money, which you say is a huge amount of money, take that sum, you say it's 40 billion, I don't actually know what it is that the government gets in total in road fund tax, and yet they're spending a measly £1 billion across the entire country. It simply isn't enough. And as you say, there's an issue of safety here. People get their vehicles damaged. People, on their bikes can't go about the roads properly. People even walking on the pavements have problems to get about. So really the government have got to wake up and look after our roads and pavements a little bit better.
The sense, though, is that an awful lot of governments, and I would include the Conservatives in this, don't really care about drivers. They don't really care about road users. They care about, pushing cycling. They care about building cycle lanes. They care about, building pedestrianised areas. But they don't really care about motorists, who provide an awful lot of money and an awful lot of tax into central government.
Well, I don't think that's quite true, Mike. You had a comment on the Mayor of London just now.
Yeah.
The Mayor of London is taking more and more of our roads over for cycle lanes. The net result is that London has become one of the most congested cities in the world.
Absolutely.
If you're trying to travel.
But it's not just in London, though. It's happening all over. It's happening in Glasgow. It's happening in Newcastle. It's happening in Bristol. It's happening in Bath. You know, happening in Oxford. If you try driving around any of those cities and tell me that they're friendly to motorists.
Yeah, but Mike, nearly all of those cities you've just mentioned are all Labour-controlled councils. I think really that this government needs to really consider the use of motorists, because we can't function as a country properly unless we can get around our roads quickly and safely.
Yeah.
And look at that picture there of congestion. I mean, that's all wasted time for all those people in all those cars and lorries.
Yeah.
So we've really got to wake up and try and see what we can do about our roads.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. Well, let's hope you can get something done. So Geoffrey Clifton Brown MP, thank you very much indeed, Conservative from North Cotswolds. Andy wants to talk about Rachel Reeves. He says this, Reeves compares herself to Thatcher. Does she mean Mark Thatcher? He got lost as well in the desert. That's where she belongs. So she can't harm the economy anymore. Great show. Brilliant. Mark Thatcher, remember when he got lost? He went on some rally, didn't he? And he got lost in the desert. What a plank. Tony wants to say something about Ukraine.
Morning, Mike. Tony from Stoke. So Keir Starmer's just given £4.5 billion of our money that doesn't exist to Ukraine. I wonder how much he's going to give to Poland that we don't know about yet. Keep up the good work, mate.
Yeah, it's a very good question. And how much is he going to give to the WEF, the World Economic Forum, in Davos? That's where he's going after Poland. One could only assume he's not going to bother coming back. Mrs. Starmer doesn't want to see him. She's like, yeah, you just carry on, mate. You carry on going round. Don't worry, I'll see you a week on Friday. Kirsten is here. She's in West London. Hello, Kirsten.
Hi, good morning, Mike.
Good morning. You've got some news for us on the British citizenship front.
Yes. So I took the test. Well, I was living in the US. I spoke to Kevin a while about how awful it was to come here.
Right.
But I had to prove that I spoke English. So I had to give away to show my my diploma from university in the States.
Right.
But when coming here, one needs to prepare for that test that you were talking about. I couldn't find the information right now, but I'm almost certain that I was offered a translator or a chaperone or a companion at some point, which can pretty much take the test for you if you don't have a good understanding of English.
Right. And do you have to take the test sort of sitting down at a desk? Is it one of those kind of exam-type tests?
I think it used to be like that when I took it about 4 years ago, maybe 5. You had to sit down in front of a computer.
Right.
But you literally, and that's what they do in the States to pass tests. They teach you how to pass the test.
Right.
So it's not necessarily that you actually understand the question.
Right.
You just learn how to answer that
So
question.
they kind of want you to pass, in other words.
Exactly.
Right.
And it's like when you go to the Home Office website, they tell you, well, you will get this when you apply for with a refugee status. It's basically telling you, come on over, we will give you all this. And I had the most awful time trying to get here with my British husband. He was even told, why can't you stay in the US to be with your wife?
Right. It's mad, isn't it? I mean, I had the same problem when I came back to the UK from having lived in America for 10 years with my American wife. They tried to put us through all kinds of hoops. You know, is it a marriage? Prove that it's not a marriage of convenience. I was like, what the hell are you talking about? You know, it was ridiculous.
That people who are literally coming here to milk the government and now my taxes.
Yes, I know, it's shocking, isn't it? And it really is, particularly if presumably you probably paid quite a lot of money to get through the process.
You have no idea. I think it was
thousands,
15 to 20,000 in the end.
Wow.
I mean, we were rejected like 3 times.
Yeah, it's incredible. And yet here we have loads and loads of these people who seek asylum. They get given it, and if they don't get given it, they stay anyway.
Exactly. It's just infuriating.
It really is. Kirsten, thank you for telling us that story. Kirsten is typical of many people who work very hard, who come to this country because they want to or because they've married somebody British, whether it's a husband or a wife. And the fact is that they then get treated ridiculously badly by the Home Office. You know, the Home Office clamps down on people who are actually trying to do something properly and legally, charges them a bucket load of money to do so, and then puts them through the ringer, as if they're cheating the system when they're actually more than happy to pay into it. Instead of which, they get left behind by people who are in front of them, who have come illegally, who are not interested in working, who are not interested in learning English or assimilating. Kemi Badenoch saying, you know, we are not a hotel in this country. We don't want people to come here if they don't want to assimilate. Well, start doing something about it. Start deporting people. Start sending them back. Stop accepting their applications for asylum. Just say, sorry, you came here illegally. Therefore, we're going to send you back to where you came from. Thanks very much indeed. 0344 499 1000 is the number. On the subject of working hard, we've got a lot of people getting quite worked up about it. Robin Crawley, I should say, says this: Mike, there's three types of people in this world: those who live to work, those who work to live, and then the millennials who haven't got a day's graft in them. I'm 46 and have had 1 day of unemployment since my teenage years. Great show as always. Absolutely right. I mean, most people who are right-thinking people want to have a job. A job gives you a reason for being. A job gives you status. A job gives you pleasure. A job gives you the right to go on holiday. The job gives you the right to buy things, to have things, because you earn money and you look after your family. I can't imagine anybody who doesn't want to have one. But we've got 9.5 million people in this country who don't want to work for one reason or another, which is shocking because we're paying for them, right? Unbelievable. It's 7:49.
Well, I think that they were always going to have to offer something on a plate because there's so much political pressure, and that's why they've come up with what, frankly, I think is a bit of a dog's breakfast. I don't want to be disparaging about it because I suppose they're doing something. And also, by the way, I don't think anyone wanted a national inquiry of the type of national inquiries, public inquiries that we've had in other areas that have taken years and years and years.
Across the UK, on DAB+, YouTube, on the app, on your mobile. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:52. Morning, Mike, says Maureen. My husband is 76 with serious health issues, but he would love to be back at work. And one from Scott, who says, Mike, you say that we should teach our children that if you work hard, you'll be rewarded. The fact is that for the last 20 years, it's the hard-working people who have been exploited by successive governments. Yeah, I know there's an element to that, Scott, and I know that people are very fed up about the fact that they feel hard done by because there are so many people who are dole bludgers, so many people who come here on the lam, so many people who come here from foreign countries, particularly illegal aliens, illegal migrants who come here and get given hotel rooms and they get given money to spend and they get given food and all of that. But it still doesn't take away from the fact that if you work and if you earn and if you get better yourself because of your job, you will feel a better individual, you will feel a better person, you will be more successful, you will be happier and you will be able to provide for your own family. And surely that is what everybody wants to do, isn't it? Simple as that. And let's talk to Cormac Smith, former Ukraine Foreign Minister advisor, because we heard the news this morning that Keir Starmer, rather surprisingly, shot off to Ukraine yesterday to form this 100-year pact with Volodymyr Zelensky. Nobody was aware that he was going to do it. It now turns out that we're spending another £4.5 billion over the course of the next few years to support UK growth and jobs, it says here. Not quite sure how that's going to work. Cormac, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike, and can I wish you a belated Happy New Year?
Yes, absolutely.
Nice to join you.
Always good to see you. Thanks very much indeed. I mean, we now are about to enter into a new period, aren't we? Donald Trump becomes president for the 47th president of the United States of America on Monday. He's already seemingly had a pretty good effect on peace in the Middle East. He probably will look at what's happening in Russia and Ukraine over the coming days and weeks. It looks as though there will be some kind of conversation on the horizon between those two countries about possibly calling a halt to the hostilities. What are you hearing?
Well, you know, it was very good to see the Prime Minister in Kyiv yesterday, and certainly my Ukrainian friends who I spoke to felt, you know, it was very, very welcome. Britain, as you know, has been Ukraine's greatest supporter. Some questions are still as to whether the support of this government is going to be as steadfast as our last government was among Ukrainians who I spoke to, and a little bit of a sense from one well-placed friend that, you know, better late than never. But I think this is a lot of optics. You know, 100-year deal, neither Keir Starmer, Volodymyr Zelensky, nor you and I, for that matter, are going to be around in 100 years. Yeah, so it's great to see the Prime Minister there, but I think what's more important is what we are doing in the short term. And I go back to what General Sir Roland Walker said before Christmas. He said, you know, the British Army is not ready to fight, and if we're not ready to fight, we're not ready to deter. So what I think is far more important, what I want to hear from Keir Starmer, is a commitment on defence spending, and he is as yet said that they will raise to 2.5% when they can afford it, and has refused to, so far, to countenance a rise to 3%. That's what Donald Trump is going to want, and that's what Mark Rutte, the new Secretary General of NATO, said in a very important speech on the 12th of December, that, you know, if we don't pay more today, we are going to pay much, much, much more tomorrow. So, you know, I listened to one very senior former military guy. It was to Bretton Gordon, actually, who said yesterday that, you know, the British Army can do this. They're talking now openly about Britain providing peacekeepers for Ukraine, which I think is a little bit cart before the horse. We haven't even got to talks yet.
Well, we're not even sure we've got the manpower, to be honest, have we?
Well, that's exactly it. And what Hamish to Bretton Gordon said yesterday was, yeah, the British Army could do this, but they certainly couldn't do anything else. And, you know, most senior figures are now telling us that we need to be prepared for a war with Russia by the end of the decade. Mike, could I offer you a reality check and any Please. Of the listeners this morning? Nikolai Patrushev, former secretary of the Security Council up to late last year, and widely recognized as one of Putin's most influential advisors. He made an address to the Security Council of the Russian Federation earlier on this week, and he said, if we do not conquer Ukraine now, we lose everything. We will not receive shale gas on the territory of Kharkiv and Donetsk regions. We will not receive critical raw materials such as lithium, cobalt, scandium, graphite, titanium, rubidium, and others, how rich Ukraine is. You know, and he then talked about we need to, we need to put 1.5 million Russian soldiers in Ukraine closer to Ukraine's borders so that they tremble, they being us. So there's all this expectation of what Donald Trump will achieve. I have noticed Donald Trump is latterly seems to be a lot more circumspect. He seems to have realized that he's not going to end this war in 24 hours, and that it is more complex than he believes. And certainly, with the words that I've just quoted from Patrushev, we are not hearing any signals from Russia other than that they still have a maximalist commitment to conquering all of Ukraine.
Yes. And also, as you know very well, better than anyone, Cormac, you know, they're very good at making those statements as well, just to rile up their domestic audience too. And they don't certainly want to give any indication that they're going to settle anything or, you know, leave Ukraine or stop the battle, because it's not in their interest to say that. But Cormac, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Got to run. Former Ukraine Foreign Ministry advisor, of course. We've got some great voicemails that have come in, voice notes, I should say. We'll be playing those out for you. We're still looking into the latest on the Israel-Hamas ceasefire. Julie Hartley-Brewer is going to be on the show coming up in the next hour. We're also going to be talking to Sunil Sharma, a political commentator as well. Simon Danchuk's here as well. We'll take all of your views, more on Rachel Reeves, more on grooming gangs and everything else. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. 2 minutes past 8. I'm Mike Graham with you until 10 o'clock, of course. 4 glorious hours of Morning Glory every single weekday morning from 6 a.m. If you're only just joining us, we've got plenty to talk about. Of course, yesterday, one of the highlights of the day was Labour's MP Mike Amesbury admitting to assault, admitting to punching a man while he was on the ground and raging, "You will not threaten your MP again, will you, you effing soft lad?" Yeah, very nice too. But apparently, we're being told that he might actually keep his job. Unbelievably, because he may, depending on the sentence, be able to escape going to jail. So therefore, he could keep his job as an MP, even if he doesn't remain as a Labour MP. Talk about two-tier justice. I mean, why is he not facing the full force of the law, as Keir Starmer would put it? Because at the end of the day, surely that's what we are all about in this country, law and order. They've locked people up because they actually wrote something on Facebook and put them in jail for months at a time, sometimes years at a time, and yet this guy, who punches one of his own constituents while he's operating as a Labour MP and has admitted assaulting a man, may not go to prison and may keep his job. What's going on? Let's ask Keir Starmer, shall we? Here's Pete.
Hi Mike, Pete from Bath. Another day, another holiday for Starmer. It wouldn't surprise me if Simon Calder was his PA soon. Great show as always, Mike. Have a great day all.
Very good one. Front page of the Daily Mail. Labour blasted over toothless grooming probes. They've decided, thanks to Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, to set up a few local grooming inquiries, right? Not as if they want to investigate the rape gangs nationally, but they want to investigate them in 5 specific places. This is a little bit of a cover-up, I'd have to say, because it's a step in the right direction, because at the end of the day, surely, if you are doing a series of regional inquiries, in the end, it amounts to a national inquiry. They just have to get a little bit more serious about it, really, because, of course, the Home Secretary said there would be a rapid audit of the scale of child sexual exploitation across the country that would look into the ethnicity of perpetrators as part of a £10 million action plan. Well, that shouldn't take long. What's the ethnicity of the grooming gangs? They're all Pakistanis. There you go. That saves you a few quid. 5 minutes past 8. This is Morning Glory. We're going to be talking to Sunil Sharma coming up. Julie Hartley-Brewer is going to be here in this hour as well. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. A couple of other big stories for you. What's going on with the Obama marriage? Barack Obama and Michelle Obama apparently may be on the rocks. Michelle Obama has not been seen with him since last August, believe it or not. She skipped Jimmy Carter's funeral, didn't go to that. Instead, he was chumming up with Donald Trump. And, of course, funnily enough, she's not going to go to the inauguration on Monday. But she's not the only one. Keir Starmer's not going either. He hasn't been invited. It is, of course, Gaff-Prone Friday. Not Gaff-Prone Friday, it's just Gaff Friday. Here's Keir Starmer himself with his own gaff this week.
And as well as Matt, I'm delighted that the inspiring Nobel Peace, Nobel Prize winner...
It's hard to believe, right? How is it possible that he gets these things so wrong? Can we have that again? Because it just makes me laugh. Unbelievable.
And as well as Matt, I'm delighted that the inspiring Nobel Peace, Nobel Prize winner...
What an absolute plank. Plank of the Week, of course, coming out tonight at 7. He won it last week. I don't know if he's going to win it this week. Mary in Kent says, Mike, so a Conservative councillor's wife can go to jail for words, but a Labour MP can punch someone to the ground and won't go to jail. Two-tier justice. It is ridiculous, isn't it? Absolute madness. Let's talk to Sunil Sharma, political commentator and host of the Rational Voices with Sunil podcast. Sunil, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike.
So, the world continues to spin in a sort of rather odd and unusual way. We've got Keir Starmer today over in Poland, where he's going to hold talks on a new security pact shortly after being in Ukraine, where he unveiled £4.5 billion worth of military aid to Ukraine as part of this 100-year partnership, which nobody knew about, and which he hasn't announced, and which he hasn't discussed, and which he hasn't even told Parliament about, right? So presumably the Speaker of the House will be a bit upset because he should have announced it surely in Parliament before he did it.
Crazy. It just seems with this war, it seems as if we want it to carry on more than anyone else. It seems Britain just want to keep this. We want to keep funding this war for reasons that I think even Keir Starmer, I don't think he actually knows the actual full history of this war, the full history of Russia, Ukraine, and I think it's really absurd that we're prioritizing foreign countries on wars that we don't totally understand rather than our own country itself. And we're seeing all the stuff that's going on every day in terms of how the UK economy is declining, the grooming gang scandals, the law problems in this country. There's just so many issues that we can sit here and talk about, but his priorities are funding a war in Russia, Ukraine, which is just absolutely bizarre.
Well, apart from anything else, where's he found the £4.5 billion from? He keeps telling us there's a £22 billion black hole. There's no money for pensioners, no money for farmers, no money for schools, there's no money for parents, there's no money for the NHS. You know, where's he found it from?
He's taken the money away from the pensioners. He's taken the money away from the citizens by increasing taxes. This is where I think he's getting his money from, and it's a real shame because it's just the priorities for Keir Starmer is not Britain. It's really clear to see. I mean, I think a lot of people were skeptical of Keir Starmer as leader. I think there weren't too many people that had a positive outlook on him, but I don't think anyone expected him to be as bad as he has or to cause as much damage as he has in 6 months. And it's got to the point now where, you know, I don't want to go down this conspiracy route of WEF puppet and all this sort of stuff, but the harsh reality is this is not somebody who has the best interests of the United Kingdom. I cannot, under any way of think that this person genuinely has the best interests of this country, because there's nothing I've seen that suggests that.
No, absolutely not. And I mean, you know, it's not a conspiracy theory to say he's off to the old World Economic Forum, because he is. After he's been in Poland, Davos gets underway this weekend. I presume he probably will go straight there rather than coming back to Britain for the weekend. I don't know. He says that he always likes to spend Friday evenings with his family. I'm not sure they agree, because they seem to be quite happy with him managing to stay away for most of the time. But let's talk about the front page of the Daily Mail. Labour blasted over toothless grooming probes. This was Yvette Cooper yesterday announcing some local inquiries. Let's have a look.
We will also provide stronger national backing for local inquiries where they are needed to get truth and justice for victims and survivors.
Yeah, truth and justice for victims and survivors, but not all victims and survivors, because there's only 5 inquiries. Now, I said earlier on the show that this is obviously a step in the right direction. It's as close as Labour have come to admitting that they got it wrong, but it's not quite enough, is it?
No, nowhere near enough. And this local council, giving local councils resources to do this, it's not enough. Our local councils going to sit there and admit that they made these mistakes? Are they going to sit there and be as truthful and honest and sit there and say, we actually were not responsible, but we allowed for this to happen? You know, I think there has to be a level of almost independence on this. There needs to be dedicated police force. There needs to be dedicated security intelligence people in this, not local councils. They're stretched as it is. They don't have the resources as it is, and they've shown that they're incompetent in dealing with this already. The fact that now we expect them to all of a sudden come up with the ideas and come up with why it happened and come up with the appropriate responses is totally inadequate. It's not just 5 councils that have been affected. There's far more than that. So I think this is a really, although it's a step in the right direction, I think it's a really, really weak step in that direction. I think most people would have much preferred if Labour came out and were honest about it and said, look, like the reality is we don't investigate this. We wanted not to upset a community because we banked their large share of votes, so we didn't really properly investigate this. We should have. We even probably stopped the actual investigations happening because, again, we want to secure the vote bank. It was the wrong thing to do. Now we actually want to correct that, and we're going to employ lots of staff into it. We're going to get resources. We're going to pay police officers more. We're going to, there's so much more they could do. This is such a weak, small step in the right direction.
Yeah. I mean, is it going to be the beginning perhaps of a shift, though? Because they're very bad at making U-turns, even though Starmer used to make them all the time. You know, once they seem to have set down their policies, they seem to not want to deviate from them, like taking the winter fuel allowance away. Didn't have to do it when they did it, but they did it anyway. Same with the VAT on private schools. They didn't have to do it in January. They did it anyway. You know, same with the farmers' inheritance tax. They could have changed it around and made it slightly more tailored for targeting the right people. They haven't done that, you know. But on this, I think this is as close as we're going to get to them admitting they got it wrong.
Maybe. I'm not so positive about it. I think there's no denying Elon Musk's role in this. I think the fact that it became an international matter, the fact that other countries were talking about this and almost, you know, it was an embarrassment for the United Kingdom. I think that played a much bigger part than the well-being of those children, the fact that there's been systematic failures for decades. I think the fact that he got international stage for a leader who's more obsessed about looking good internationally than at home, I think that had a much bigger impact. And the reality is Elon Musk or whoever other international leaders, they're not going to be sitting here constantly talking about United Kingdom. It's only when something as bad as this happens. So I think this is more just the power of social media, the power of leaders across the world basically saying what is going on in Britain. I think that's had a much bigger impact than the actual case of 250,000 girls being sexually exploited. I think the reality is he doesn't listen to the people of the United Kingdom. He listens to those people in Davos, the WEF. He listens to those profiles. And when they're saying what is going on in your country, I think he then wakes up and thinks, okay, I need to do something. I don't think it's anything to do with the United Kingdom people or what's in their best interests.
You may be right. I'll tell you somebody else who doesn't listen to the ordinary people of Britain, and certainly not the ordinary people of London, Sadiq Khan. This is an amazing piece of footage of Sadiq Khan being incredibly arrogant in a questioning session with Susan Hall, who formerly was the leader of the Conservatives in the London Assembly. Have a look at this.
I asked you this question last week and you found every which way but not to answer it. Just how many grooming gangs have we got in London?
To avoid any misunderstanding, can she define what she means by that?
Yes, if you look at what's gone on in Rotherham, where there are people taking young girls, grooming them for sex, that is what I'm talking about.
We know in London there are issues about exploitation of young people, but they're not as defined by the member in her definition of what those types of gangs are.
So are you saying we haven't got the same sort of gangs that are in Rotherham, Bradford and lots of other places in the country?
Just for you misunderstanding, what does she mean by that?
You know full well what I mean by that. It's all over the television. You know exactly what I mean by that. These gangs of people that are grooming young girls for sex. Do we actually have those in London?
I'm unclear, Chair, what is meant by the question. If you could spell it out, I can answer.
I've just spelt it out. Are you not listening? It's the sort of gangs that groom young girls at a young age for sex. Exactly how much clearer do you want me to be?
I mean, he's just being deliberately awkward there, isn't he? Incredible.
I don't think there's a more dangerous person in UK politics than Sadiq Khan. What he's doing to London is nothing short of disgraceful. There's a reason why businesses, corporations, individuals, talent are all leaving the United Kingdom, in particular London. And I think he is a major, major reason behind that. If you look at the decline of London under his leadership, directly as a consequence, you know, there's a lot of the political stuff you can argue. You can look at blame Tories. You could argue it's been something that's gone on for years and something that's been brewing, something that's not been addressed. And there's definitely a reality to that in terms of the UK general growth decline. It's not something that's happened overnight, although Sakira seems really want to make it even as bad as possible, as soon as possible. But I think with Sadiq Khan, there is a clear correlation between when Sadiq Khan became the mayor of London and London's decline. Its decline in safety, its decline in as an economic superpower. The longer this man stays in power of London, the more the worse the city gets. And it's a real shame, because this used to be the place where everyone talks about as being one of the economic superpowers. It's now no one across the globe is really that interested in London. They'd rather look towards New York, Tokyo, other places, Dubai, other areas as economic hubs than London. And that reality, that reason is because of Sadiq Khan. He's out of touch. He has no idea what's going on in London. Again, just like Keir Starmer, but I'd argue Keir Starmer almost on steroids, and he's been doing this a lot longer than him. So I don't think there's a more dangerous person in UK politics than Sadiq Khan.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. Couldn't agree more. Sunil Sharma there, political commentator, host of the Rational Voices with Sunil podcast. Now, it is Friday. Julie Hartley-Brewer's coming up next, but let's get a gaffe from Kevin O'Sullivan.
I mean, you can't go anywhere these days without hearing people talk about it, and that is these weight loss drugs. So I'm going to be looking into
My
this.
sister's on them. I saw it that she came to stay with me at the weekend.
Did she?
She said I lost 2 stone.
Wow. Did you notice that she'd lost 2 stone? Brothers are rubbish, right?
Yeah, thanks, Kev. Kev's sister there, for anyone who doesn't know, is apparently taking weight loss drugs. There you go. There's nothing like being outed by your own brother on a national television show. Let's get a voice note from Jacqueline.
Morning, Mike. The day after October the 7th, we had people in our streets racing up and down in cars, celebrating that people in Israel had been raped, butchered. Now, we've had weeks and weeks and weeks of these marching up and down in our streets every week. Free Palestine, free Palestine. Well, they've now got what they wanted, and Palestine are going to be free from the wars that are going on. Yet I saw no celebration.
Yeah, very true. Because it wasn't ever about free Palestine, it was about the death of Israel. That was what they wanted. By the way, there's another Palestinian march coming on Saturday, tomorrow, in London. Marvellous, isn't it? I bet you they won't be celebrating either. Coming up next, though, we're going to talk to Julie Hartley-Brewer. She's got a column in The Sun today talking all about that drill rapper, the killer who's making money thanks to the BBC. This is Talk.
I think that they were always going to have to offer something on a plate because there's so much political pressure, and that's why they've come up with what, frankly, I think is a bit of a dog's breakfast. I don't want to be disparaging about it because I suppose they're doing something. And also, by the way, I don't think anyone wanted a national inquiry of the type of national inquiries, public inquiries that we've had in other areas that have taken years and years and years.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 22 minutes past 8. I'm Mike Graham. Julie Hartley-Brewer won't be here at 10 o'clock, but we're delighted to say that she's taken some time for us today because she's got a column in The Sun, as she does every single Friday, on page 12 today. Julie Hartley-Brewer talking sense to the nation. She is, of course, here Monday to Thursday every single day from 10. Delighted to say a very good morning. And to Julie, a very good morning to you. How nice to see you on a Friday.
And also, Barbara, this is like the most we ever get to chat because we get about 3 minutes
It's true.
at the beginning of the end of your show, beginning of mine.
Absolutely. Yes, very good to see you. Now, I won't keep you long because I know you've got lots of things to be getting on with. But look,
go back to bed.
Massive story yesterday in The Sun about this ghastly individual, Jake Afari, whose rapper name is now 10, kills and murders young Jimmy Mizzen, who was a lovely young boy who had nothing but good things going for him, murdered for absolutely no reason in 2008. This guy has been promoted by the BBC. It now turns out today from the story in the Times that basically he may have breached his parole conditions and he may have to now be recalled. But the BBC still kind of aren't apologising. They're not saying anything about it, really, are they?
No. It is just extraordinary. Well, the piece I've written for the Sun today, I say around a weekly column for them every Friday, is just the BBC just once again, lovable Auntie Beeb. Oh, don't misgender anyone. Oh, don't be a climate denier. Oh, don't be Graham Linehan and be one of our greatest comedy writers and refuse to accept the pretense that trans women are actually women. Oh, no, then you're beyond the pale. Don't, for instance, have a song that's mocking Keir Starmer over the winter fuel payment. No, that we're not going to play that. Oh, but, if you murdered a 16-year-old boy in cold blood in a bakery in 2008 and you're out and you're rapping about it and you're rapping with lyrics where you're basically glorifying the crime that you committed that took a young life, not a problem at all. I genuinely believe the BBC has lost all of its moral compass if it ever had one. I think they are seriously so morally depraved and hypocritical now. We cannot ignore it anymore.
No, I don't think we can. And you're absolutely right. I mean, let's not forget they also banned Baby It's Cold Outside because they thought it might be a bit like men controlling women. And you kind of going, yeah, but this guy's talking about slashing people, stabbing people. He even refers to the specific crime that he committed. And apparently the people who run Radio 1 Extra think it's really daring and interesting. And it's really, really
and
arty,
he's a great young talent.
Yeah.
I've got to be honest with you, I thought the lyrics were actually very clever, very well written. It's when you realise that they are about a killing he himself committed and you realise the effect on the family. Now, look, you and I are free speech advocates.
Yes.
I'm not calling for this to be banned. I'm no Mary Whitehouse. I'm not saying, oh, it was a bit nipple, I'm not saying that at all. I'm just wondering why the BBC thinks it's okay to promote this man, but they censor and sort of unperson and deplatform so many other people. And that there are question marks about the fact that, he's trying to profit from his crimes. Well, you're not allowed to do that.
Right.
Look, I would rather he was singing about stabbing than he was actually stabbing. But the reality is, I mean, £1.4 million of our taxpayers' money was given to the Met in the last year alone so that they could actually monitor what stuff is going on YouTube from these drill rappers. These are linked with actual crimes.
Yes.
Dozens and dozens and dozens of actual stabbings and even murders are linked to these drill rappers and these sort of gang, sort of you dissed me in your rap, you dissed me. This isn't some sort of esoteric, well, if we see Elvis Presley's hips gyrate in 1957 on the US telly, will it degenerate an entire bunch of women? No, we are talking about actual crimes being celebrated and being basically threatened in this music. I think we need to talk about it.
I think we absolutely do. And, it's one thing to have the music out there, as you say. You don't want to have it banned necessarily. But it's another thing for it to be actively promoted by the organisation, which is funded by taxpayers, which is, as you say, completely hypocritical. But also the interesting development, as I say today, is that Jimmy Mizzen's mother has been speaking to The Sun. And she's basically saying that looking at the video that he's made while he's singing this song, it looks as though he's not far away from the O2, which is in the borough of Greenwich, where he supposedly, according to his parole conditions, not allowed to go. So he may now have to be recalled to prison, which would be a sort of suitable punishment for him, I think.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's not very complicated. You're not allowed in one borough where the family of the boy you you murdered. You also, you bullied and beaten up Jimmy's brother Harry as well.
Yeah.
That was where he was there at the scene when Jimmy was stabbed with the stabbed, smashed in the face with a glass bowl.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's not an unreasonable condition, is it? But again, the key thing is this man was let out. He had a life term, minimum 14 years. He served that, yeah. But he's clearly showing no remorse. He's clearly still a danger. He had had a long history of very, very brutal violence. There was a rape charge at one point, beating up a girl he actually got convicted of. So he was a nasty little piece of work. He was a wrong un then. I think he's probably a wrong un now. But yeah, don't worry, he's out on our streets, being celebrated by the BBC. Well done, everyone.
I know, and apparently, supposedly locked away for life in 2008. And I know that he was only 19 when he was locked away for life. But I mean, what's the point of calling it locked away for life if it isn't locked away for life?
I know, and also again, people say, well, he's served his term, he's paid his debt to society. If it was your child, if it was my child lying on that morgue slab, or who I had to run to the bakery to find them bleeding to death on the floor, would 14 years feel enough to us? I doubt it.
I very much doubt it. Yeah, just one other thing before we let you go. You've also written about Tulip Siddiq and that row that forced Keir Starmer to lose the third most interesting and powerful woman from his government in the first 6 months of it. I'm beginning to wonder whether he's got some kind of a curse on him, Keir Starmer. He went to Ukraine, suddenly found £4.5 billion in his back pocket to give to them for the next partnership detail for 100 years. But I'm wondering, and I don't know what you think about this, whether Lord Hermer KC might be the next faller in the government. He's the Attorney General. It turns out he's made 30,000 quid from Jerry Adams.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, all of Keir Starmer's, little mates are all joining in on seeing the fun, aren't they? And they're all involved. This is the thing. I mean, that's why Tulip Siddiq lasted as long as she did. I think it was about 27 days. Yeah. The Prime Minister stood by her as a junior Treasury Minister. Well, it's because she's his mate. In North London, they go to the same dinner parties, don't they? They're in the same gang. I mean, this is the. I mean, I don't know about you, Mike. I mean, it's easy. What happened to Tulip, though, Tulip could have happened to anyone, because which of us can honestly put our hand on our heart and say that when we were given a £700,000 flat in King's Cross in our early 20s when we were a student, that we weren't sure who it was from? Was it from mum and dad, or was it from someone who'd been funding our dodgy aunt who was Prime Minister of Bangladesh? It could have happened to any of us.
Exactly.
And I think we should be more sympathetic.
Yes, absolutely right. And I mean, of course, she will still. And also, I mean, the other story today is that MP up in Cheshire who was pleading guilty to assault yesterday apparently might not lose his job. So not the full force of the law for him then, because apparently he might get a sentence which means he can stay on as an MP.
He might get a sentence that he can stay on as an MP, but there was, I mean, the punch in the face was pretty darn obvious. You could all see it. There's going to be a recall. I just don't think for a moment. The people of Runcorn are going to put up with that. It's just completely and utterly untenable. He's already lost the Labour whip. That was nice of them, wasn't it? I mean, I just don't see this carrying on. The pressure will be on him. But again, going to lose your salary. I know what, Keir Starmer. Why don't you just bump him up to the Lords? That'll solve the problem.
Exactly right. Great to see you. Have a wonderful weekend. Julie Hartley-Brewer, thank you very much. Back on Monday at 10 o'clock. Don't forget to read her column every single Friday in The Sun. It's a hoot, an absolute hoot. Coming up, we're going to be talking about a great many other things, including, of course, what on earth is going on with the Grooming Gangs inquiry. Is it an inquiry? Is it a probe? Is it just a sort of a question? Who's actually going to be held accountable? Who's going to be questioned? Who's going to be running it? Lots of questions. Nobody seems to know. Let's get a voice note from Graham, who's got some advice for Labour.
Mike, this is Graham in Manchester with a few points for Rachel Reaver, the pensioner freezer, Mad Miliband, the dullest spark ever to be put in charge of our power grid, and Lord Two-Tier, Free Gear, Never Hear, Up Himself, Keir. In reverse order. 5. We are fed up of being lied to. That one is for all three of you. That's why the Tories got kicked out. 4. We are fed up being taxed up to the yin-yang while you suck up to your union mates with paying ever more for your woke green agenda, and fed up with nothing ever being done by you that improves our lot. 3. We are fed up watching the NHS cripple itself by employing countless diversity, equality and inclusion officers at 100 grand per year. 2. We are fed up watching our money being spent on illegal immigrants who do not share our values and care nothing for this country. 1. And we are fed up with you doing nothing for the thousands of children affected by rape grooming gangs. Sort yourself out.
Absolutely tremendous. Graham, absolutely voice note of the week. Well played. I mean, we've had some great ones this week, by the way, but that is absolutely gold. Spot on. Brilliant. Meanwhile, here's a headline for you. Reeves, I won't let them get me down, it says on the front page of the Telegraph. Well, we're all down thanks to you. Money's down. You know, cash in the pocket, down. Money in the bank, down. Everything's down, I'm afraid, including our expressions. She says the defiant Chancellor likens herself to Thatcher as critics call for her to quit over poor growth. We've got no growth, by the way, in the retail sector. We've had those figures today. The best note that I've had today, I think, on whether she likens herself to Thatcher or not, was it Mark Thatcher she's likening herself to? Do you remember the bloke that got lost in the desert when he went on that rally? He had to be rescued. That's what she's like. The Mark Thatcher of the Exchequer. Well played, Rachel Reeves. Rachel Thieves. We'll be back after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 8:35. How about this from Nicola in Norfolk? Morning, Mike. Given the origins of drill music are well known to be linked to gangs, there is no excuse for the BBC not to do research on who drill artists are before promoting them. Well, exactly right. And Julia's absolutely correct in her column today. The idea that the BBC bans songs like the one that made fun of Starmer over Christmas, you know, freezing this Christmas. We had the guy on here ourselves, a charity single raising money to give to pensioners' charities because they can't heat their own homes. They ban that because it's offensive to Keir Starmer, but they don't ban this guy who's making hay and making songs and making money out of the murder that he committed of Jimmy Mizint in 2008. Maureen in Stamford says, Mike, I'm so excited. Champers for me tonight. I actually have an appointment with my GP for next week. Well, steady on, Maureen. There's still time for them to cancel it. Don't forget. Here's one from John in Brittany. He said, I lived in Bexley until I retired. I've been watching since 6 a.m. Keep the content up. Could you please cover Davos and their vision for our future when Sakir visits? Yeah, I think it gets underway this weekend. So I'm not quite sure whether Sakir, two-tier, never here, free gear, is going to go straight there or whether he's going to come home for a bit and see his family, who he purports to want to spend an awful lot of time with. strangely enough, they don't seem to agree. Simon Danchuk's here, former Labour MP, because he's got plenty to say about the grooming gang scandal. He revealed just towards the end of last year that he was effectively silenced by the chief of the Labour Party in Westminster when he wanted to raise issues about the grooming gangs in his part of the world, in Rochdale I think it was, and he was told, no, we don't want to do that, we don't want to go there. We've got today Yvette Cooper basically announcing that there's going to be some new, shall we say, regional, not even regional really, just local inquiries. Let's have a look at her announcement.
We will also provide stronger national backing for local inquiries where they are needed to get truth and justice for victims and survivors.
Yeah, but will they get truth and justice for victims and survivors? Because Labour are blasted on the front page of the Mail today for the toothless grooming probes, which won't actually demand that anybody appears before the panels. It won't demand that anybody necessarily has to be held accountable. So, Simon, a very good morning to you. I don't know whether this is I think it's a step in the right direction. I think it's an admission by Labour that they got it wrong, but it's a sort of halfway house, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't think it's even a halfway house, to be honest, Mike. What we learned from this announcement from the Home Secretary is that they do not care about the victims of these rape gangs, and they care very much about those that covered up the abuse. The truth is, for the uninitiated to British politics, this is what you call a political fudge. And so you've got Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, trying to move the agenda on so that we don't scrutinise those that covered it up. The local inquiries that they've announced don't give the powers to summons people. They don't give them the powers to insist on evidence being given. They're only covering 5 areas, local areas, when we know there are over 50 areas where this type of rape gang abuse went on. So they're trying to move the agenda on. That's the reality of it. It might have worked in the 1990s, the sort of thing that the Blair government did, but we're in a very different period now. Social media is very different. The public are outraged by this issue. It's a national scandal, a national justice criminal scandal, this. And we need to see action taken. And I don't think the public will stop campaigning for this until we get it.
No, I think that's absolutely right, because we've got more and more victims coming forward now, thankfully, because they've seen other people doing it, and it obviously always encourages these poor young women who have been so brutalised and so terribly treated, but they've got now the courage to come forward. We've got one in the Daily Mail today, Scarlett, aged 19, told how she was ferried around the north of England by older men, drugged and used for sex. She's a lovely-looking young woman. She was picked upon when she was just a schoolgirl by these horrible individuals. At the age of 13, she wanted to be a police officer, and she wasn't particularly a working-class kid. She was a middle-class child, but she had a frightening late-night incident at a bus station, and she was then found herself placed under this gang's influence, and it all went horribly wrong from there. So, I mean, this is a story that touches far more people, I think, than we even know. Daily Express has got a different victim on the front page, saying that she was repeatedly raped as a child by an Asian grooming gang, and she now wants a full national inquiry. I mean, at least wouldn't it have been better if they'd said, look, let's do it regionally then? Take perhaps, the Greater Manchester area, which might include Oldham, which might include Rochdale, and look at that. Take, Yorkshire, which might include Leeds and Bradford and those kind of cities, Surely they could have made it more, far-reaching than it is now.
Yeah, absolutely. They could have done so much more than they announced yesterday in this statement. But they don't want to reveal those that covered it up. Labour are culpable in this. Labour politicians are culpable in having covered it up, and they don't want that to come to light. Right. This is the reality of it. But the public expect the perpetrators to be prosecuted. That's a given, isn't it? We expect the police to do their job now. But what we also want is those that covered it up, public servants, local politicians, national politicians, to actually reveal who they were and why they covered it up, and then to see some form of punishment towards them. That's what the public are calling out for. And until they get that, they won't stop campaigning on it.
No, exactly right. And I mean, Maggie Oliver was on with me earlier this week, and, you know, all of Keir Starmer's kind of supporters and the people who say that, oh, he did a great job bringing this to light, you know, she disputes that. You know, everybody says, oh, Keir Starmer was the only one that actually got the prosecutions actually up and running. She says that he should have done more. She says, and I take her view for it more than I would take his view for it, she says that he should have started prosecuting these cases much earlier than he did, which was very much at the end of his tenure as Director of Public Prosecutions.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I think he came into position in 2008, didn't do anything at all on it until 2012. Right. There were cases that went through the CPS that weren't actioned under his leadership, which could have been. So I agree with Maggie Oliver. Maggie and I worked on the Rochdale grooming scandal back in 2012. I met her back then well over 10 years ago, and we campaigned on these issues. And she's a very strong voice on this. And I think we are at one in saying we want to identify those people who covered this up, prosecute the perpetrators, but uncover those that covered it up. That's the key issue here, and we're not getting it yet, but I don't think people will stop until we get a proper, full national inquiry. Absolutely right. And Maggie knows who those people are as well. She hasn't named them to me, but she says she knows of at least 2 senior police officials who were involved in cover-ups, and she can happily name them to any inquiry that wants to ask her that question. But one final thing, I've got a text here from Gurdeep who says, good morning, Mike. About these Muslim grooming rape gangs, no one has mentioned how the leaders of these gangs have profited from all of this. These profits are then being spent on their own families, so even families need to be prosecuted, perhaps, for their involvement. And that's a good point. Nobody has mentioned that. That's a really good point, actually, in terms of there's no doubt about it. Some of these gangs were mixed up in drug dealing and other nefarious acts. I'm pretty sure on that. And you're right. People in the community would have known about this and stayed silent. And some of it, in terms of those that covered it up, it's about, in Labour's example, it's about not wanting to upset the Muslim vote. But it's also about not wanting to damage multiculturalism. And some people in the wider community will be concerned about that. Well, we have to have an honest national conversation about where we're getting multiculturalism wrong. And that's what's required now. And that would shine some light on the point that your listener has made. Yeah, absolutely right. Simon, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Simon Danchuk, the former Labour MP, talking about why this particular move by Yvette Cooper is not anywhere close to what it should be. It is nothing like a national inquiry and doesn't really compel people to appear before any of the panels that they're going to be setting up in only 5 places, when we know there are 50 places that need investigating. Tim says this, I truly hate what's happening to the UK. We no longer get things done. We get division and hate. Why is it governments never do what they say? It is fraud and lies. We need to change the system in Parliament that no one party can have over 50% of the seats, with other parties making up the other 50% of the seats. Then we can have true debates. You may well be right. Let's get a voice note from Simon.
Morning, Mike. Simon in North Wales. Just wondering when Keir Starmer's actually going to start talking about the things that people care about. You know, he babbles on about, I don't know, AI, doctor's appointments, if there's doctors available. Is that everyone's priority at the minute? You know, how about talking about the cost of living crisis? How about talking about these grooming gangs? How about talking about immigration? How about talking about, you know, what the world's going to look like in April when all these businesses have got all these massive payments they've got to make? People are going to lose jobs. Costs are going to go up. There's absolutely no doubt about it. Inflation will probably rise off the back of that, which will have a knock-on effect on interest rates. But yeah, no mention, no talk about it. We're just going to go and see Zelensky and give him a 100-year deal. Honestly, Keir is an absolute disgrace. So, great show as always, Mike. Have a good day.
Simon, thank you very much indeed. Very good point you make. People do care about immigration. They do care about the grooming gangs, 2 subjects that Keir Starmer doesn't like to talk about. He'd rather be in Ukraine. He'd rather be in Poland talking about the security of the West, you know, because that's not troublesome for him, and it doesn't mean that he has to do anything. He just has to talk like a robot. 100-year partnership, fixing the foundations. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's 8:46. Coming up, we're going to get more bad news on Sadiq Khan. Not only does he not want to discuss grooming gangs, not only does he shrink from that, but he doesn't want to talk about knife crime either in London. where people are getting stabbed every single day. This is Talk.
Government borrowing costs hit a 27-year high, and the pound is taking a pounding. Gloomy economic data is expected to show inflation and growth are off course.
Let me ask again, and can you please be clear, will Rachel Reeves be your Chancellor for the duration of this parliament?
Rachel Reeves is doing a fantastic job. She has my full confidence, and she has the full confidence of the entire party.
Can Rachel Reeves hold on as Chancellor?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
It's 8:49. Coming up at 10 o'clock, Russell Quirk is in for Alex Phillips today. We'll be hearing from him just before 10 as to what's coming up on the show. One here from Nick, who says the BBC and the criminal rapper. Didn't the BBC ban a winter fuel song to protect the feelings of the Starmer? Well, yes, we did say that. They also banned Baby It's Cold Outside because they thought it was a bit sexist. But rapping about a killing that you've done is OK, not a problem. Now we're going to talk to Alex Wilson, Reform UK's London Assembly member. He's been on this show regularly in the past because he's one of those questioning Sadiq Khan about a great many things. Here he is yesterday questioning Sadiq Khan, not on rape gangs, but on knife crime.
The year's only just begun, and already we've seen at least 9 major stabbing incidents on our streets. On the 1st of January, 25-year-old man stabbed on Oxford Street. 5th of January, double stabbing on Kilburn High Road. 6th of January, 18-year-old man stabbed on Prince Imperial Road. 7th of January, we know the tragic murder of Kellyanne Bacassa, stabbed in broad daylight on a bus. Also, 7th of January, reports of stabbing in Mile End. 11th of January, stabbing and 2 shootings in Homerton. 13th of January, father of 2, Gregory Castillo Volquez, stabbed to death in Haringey. And on the 14th of January, stabbing outside City and Islington College and also on Ilford High Road. My team has been working on a budget amendment where we would like to fund almost 1,000 police officers to deliver a targeted knife crime task force. And the way we do this is reduce the cost of your staff budget back to 2016 levels. That would give us the funding to do this. Now, obviously, I can't table that as a budget amendment on my own. I need support from other groups. Would you encourage members of other groups, perhaps your own group in the Labour Party, perhaps the Conservatives, perhaps anybody, to second that amendment so that it can be discussed and debated in full next week at the budget meeting?
As a rule of thumb, I never encourage anyone to work with reform.
I never encourage anyone to work with reform, despite the fact that Alex made a perfectly good point, listing all of the terrible stabbings that have happened even just in this first part of January. Absolutely extraordinary, isn't it? Alex is with us. Alex, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike. Thanks for inviting me back.
Not at all. Sadiq Khan gets more and more arrogant with every single week that goes by. We already played out this morning the clip of him talking to Susan Hall, trying to bait her and make her say that it was a Pakistani grooming gang that she was asking a question about, when in fact she was simply asking whether there were any grooming gang activities in London. He didn't answer that question. I can't believe he said what he just said to you. He doesn't encourage anyone to work with reform. What sort of a maniac is he?
I know, it's shocking, because on previous occasions, when I asked him about something else, the last Mayor's Question Time, he suggested that perhaps I should try and use the budget process to come up with an amendment to deal with the particular point that I was quizzing him on. So I thought, great, I'll take your advice, Mr. Mayor, and I will do exactly that. So this follows on from, obviously, when I was on the show last week, we were talking about the letter that me and Richard Tice, our Deputy Leader, had sent to Sadiq, asking him to declare a public order emergency and take extraordinary steps to really try and get on top of this knife crime crisis, and through stop and search, through more police presence, weapons streets, sweeps, etc. But this follows on from that. We've actually now found a way of funding exactly this targeted knife crime task force, which will be up to almost 1,000 officers, and the way we do it is by cutting back the Mayor's staffing budget to 2016 levels. Nobody complained in 2016, at least I can't remember anyone complaining in 2016 that Boris didn't have enough staff when he was Mayor and when he left office. And yet since then, Sadiq's headcount in City Hall has doubled and the cost has trebled. So use that money to put that back into frontline policing, particularly to target knife crime, so we can do things like more stop and search, more weapon sweeps, and just a general increased police presence in those key areas where we're seeing these stabbings. Because we've seen already this year at least nine major stabbing incidents. That's one every other day. Business as usual isn't working. That's why I put this forward. And all I was asking yesterday, I wasn't necessarily asking him to actually support my plan. I just wanted him to encourage other members to second the amendment so it could get debated. Because the way things work in the Assembly, you need a proposer and a seconder. I'm a single member on my own. I need support from other groups. That's all I was asking for. Get it on the table. Then we can discuss it. Then we can debate it. And then see if it's acceptable after that.
So he's effectively shutting down debate. Doesn't want you to take part in anything because he doesn't want anybody to have anything to do with reform. He doesn't appreciate or accept the democratic will of the people who have put you there because they voted for you.
Absolutely. I respect the fact that he won his election fair and square and he has a right and a mandate to do what he's doing. But at the same time, the Assembly is elected at the same time as the Mayor, and our principal job is to hold him to account and make other suggestions. So I have a mandate to do what I'm doing as well. It's a shame he doesn't respect that.
Yeah, it really is. And I mean, as far as the movement of legislation, if you like, on knife crime, knife crime seems to be getting worse. We saw a piece of footage yesterday from, I think it was the Young Offenders Institution in Feltham, which is again part of the London Assembly's region, I would say. Two guys there fighting with zombie knives, which was recorded back end of last year. There was supposed to be a zombie knife amnesty of some kind, wasn't there, at the end of last year as well? It doesn't appear to have made any difference whatsoever to the level of violence out there.
No, well, it's shocking. Well, to be fair, credit where it's due, the government, I believe, has now banned zombie knives, so at least that may well help. But no, it's terrifying.
They banned them, but they won't help because you can still get them. I mean, how has that made any difference?
Yeah, and you need to have the enforcement out there to catch these things and stop the sales and find them where they're being hidden, where they're being stashed, and get them off the streets. And that's it. The most important thing is to get these weapons off the streets, and that's what we want to try and do.
Yeah, absolutely right. Alex, we're good to talk to you, and thank you very much for coming on. Alex Wilson, Reform UK's London Assembly member. Absolutely shocking state of affairs, where Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London, has actually said, and he's not even embarrassed to say it, which tells you an awful lot about the man. He's not even embarrassed to say, I'm not going to have anybody talk to reform. I'm not going to encourage anyone to work with reform. Reform are a democratically elected political party who have got 5 MPs in the House of Commons. They've got 1 member in the London Assembly, and he is so arrogant that he's going to tell people not to work with them. That's extraordinary, isn't it? Absolutely unbelievable. 0344 499 1000 is the number. Let's talk to Ken, who's in Leicestershire. Hello, Ken.
Hello, Mike. Good morning.
Good morning. What can I do for you, Ken?
This rape gang thing.
Yeah.
I just had an idea that for anyone who, any victims or anybody,
yeah,
to start reporting it now.
Yeah.
To like a local police station, log it, get the officer's name and everything.
Yeah.
So that like people can see that it is being reported.
Yes. Because surely under any circumstance now, any police station, any police officer would not chase them away. They would know that under the circumstances that we're now living, they would have to take notice of it, right?
This is the point, isn't it?
Yeah.
They wouldn't dare do it now.
Right.
You know, now the government's involved in everything.
Yeah.
You've got to do something about it.
Yeah. No,
the more the merrier.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a very good idea, because we know from Maggie Oliver and others who have told us that it's still going on in all sorts of parts of the country.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, believable.
It's incredible.
Would it be an idea for yourselves and probably a newspaper to get it out there, for the people that you don't reach?
Yes.
To actually get into the local police station and get it all started.
Yeah. Yes, it's a very good idea. I think it's a brilliant idea. Ken, thank you very much for that. Ken in Leicestershire there. Let's do that. And if anybody is listening right now, and if you know of somebody who is being interfered with by these rape gangs, if you know that something is going on, by all means now take it to the police, because, as Ken says, the police will not be able to, in any way, shape or form, refuse to deal with you. Because if they do, they will have their names taken down, they will have their badge numbers taken down, and they will be in big trouble. Let's get a voice note from Michelle on Labour.
Hi, Mike. It's Michelle from Rutland. When are people going to wake up to the fact that this government are globalists? They don't care at all about the people of this country. They are following some globalist ideology at the detriment of Britain, and they don't give a hoot. They give away millions to other countries. They're insistent on this ridiculous net zero policy, which is going to bankrupt us. Also, it's not all we do is moan and talk about it, but they're not going to do anything. They've got to be got rid of. This is unprecedented.
You're absolutely right, Michelle. They don't care about us. It's very clear. They don't care about anybody in Britain. They don't care about what happens to Britain. They care only about their own simple little box of ideology, and everything that's in that box is all they care about. It's a shocking state of affairs. Surely Jimmy Mizen's murderer is drill and music, is a hate crime, and it's inciting violence. Isn't this hate speech? And shouldn't he be rounded up and immediately imprisoned, just like the far right? Says Lorraine. Daniel says this from Surrey. Morning, Mike. With regards to the rapper and the dreadful BBC, remember the absolute hoo-ha when Relaxed by Frankie Goes to Hollywood was banned by the oh-so-righteous BBC back in the 80s? How far we've come. Exactly right. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 2 minutes past 9. I'm Mike Graham, and this, of course, is the point on Friday when I say, I don't know how we got here. We've been here since 6 a.m. If you've missed any of it, welcome to the fastest growing breakfast show that you've seen anywhere in the history of breakfast shows. We're doing so well. We've got millions and millions of people watching us. We've got so much going on social media. You want to follow us on Twitter. You want to follow us on YouTube. You want to follow us on TikTok. You want to follow us on Facebook. All manner of social media. We're all over it like a rash. Even Instagram, I think, you can find us on as well. We've got much to say today. Front page of The Times has got overworked young staff signed off with stress. Almost a third of young workers were signed off work with stress last year. That's people between the ages of 18 and 24 who seem to think that, you know, it's very stressful having a full-time job. Sometimes you just don't feel like going in. Oh, really? Yeah, well, sometimes we all don't feel like going in, but you go in because that's your job. Daily Mail's got Labour blasted over toothless grooming probes. Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, has decided that she wants to have some kind of inquiry, but not much of an inquiry, just a bit of an inquiry into 5 particular locations, not particularly binding, not really going after the people that covered it all up, maybe going after some of the people that might have been perpetrators, maybe, just maybe. Also on the front page of the Daily Mail, a fascinating story, we're going to talk about it in this hour, what's going on with Barack Obama's marriage, because apparently he hasn't been seen out in public with Michelle since last August. He's going to the inauguration on Monday. President Trump becomes the 47th president of the United States. She's not going, apparently. Neither is Keir Starmer, by the way. We've got some news for you on that front. He's in Poland today, and we'll be giving you a little guide to Keir Starmer's travels. It's a brilliant thing that we've put together here at Talk. We've been meaning to do it for a while. We've got it ready to go. Front page of The Sun goes with Lock Him Up Again. This is this ghastly rapper, Jake Farry, that we talked about with Julie Hartley-Brewer. She's written about it in her column in The Sun today. Unmasked by The Sun as the murderer of Jimmy Mizin. He's facing a return to jail now because apparently the video that he filmed, unfortunately for him, showed him in Greenwich, which he's not supposed to be in because he was banned from going there as part of the conditions of his parole. Absolutely ridiculous state of affairs. BP losing 4,700 jobs in a fight to revive their share price. Guess why they're losing jobs? Because they've all gone green. They've decided to give up on the petrol, oil and gas business and they've decided to go green instead. Well, now they're running out of money. Who could have said that? And Rachel Reeves, finally, on the front page of the Daily Telegraph, she says, I won't let them get me down. She's not going to be forced out of her job. She says she likens herself to Thatcher and she's going to hang in there. And as we've said before, that's not Margaret Thatcher she's liking herself to. That's Mark Thatcher, the one that got lost in the desert. 0344 499 1000 is the number. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. Welcome to the final hour of Morning Glory. Russell Quirk coming up at 10 o'clock. Let's talk to Nigel Huddleston, Conservative MP for Droitwich and Evesham. He's also co-chair of the Conservative Party. Nigel, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Now, I'm afraid to say we've got Keir Starmer away again. He went to Kyiv yesterday to unveil £4.5 billion worth of aid to Russia, to Ukraine, even though we're not supposed to have any money. He's now in Poland. I presume after that he's going to go to Davos, so I don't know if we're going to see him for a while.
Well, you know, that's no great loss because when he's here, he does a lot of damage to the UK, doesn't he? So, you know, I don't really mind that.
I mean, that's one way of looking at it. Let's look at what happened yesterday in Parliament. Yvette Cooper's decided that she might want to be far right because she now wants to have some kind of inquiry into the grooming gangs, but not a proper inquiry, just a kind of a slight inquiry, maybe just locally based, not really necessarily binding on anybody. What do you make of that?
It doesn't go anywhere near far enough. You know, there's an overwhelming demand from the British public on social media, from Kemi Badenoch, from many parliamentarians to say that we need a full public inquiry because what was announced yesterday, as you know, and I know you've been reporting on this and thank you for doing so, it doesn't compel people to give evidence. It can't do the level of investigation that a public inquiry would. So I think under pressure they've responded, but it's nowhere near far enough. And you can imagine the correspondence that Labour MPs must be getting at the moment on this, because there is overwhelming public demand for us to get to the bottom of this. Lots of work was done before. It's all helped, but it's not gone far enough, and we do need a public inquiry.
Do you think this is by some way, though, a step in the right direction? It's the first admission, really, that the Labour government have made so far in power, that they got something wrong, because they were very sure only last week that this was not going to be the case.
Yes, I mean, look, to be gracious, it's a step in the right direction. Of course, you know, we put the amendment in a couple of weeks ago, and Labour MPs voted against it. So we've got some movement now, but it's not far enough. So look, if this is an indication that they'll eventually come around to doing the right thing and hold a full public inquiry, then I welcome that. But let's not pretend the announcement yesterday was far enough. It's not. It's not satisfactory. We need it to be really thorough. We now know increasingly, unfortunately, the number of towns and cities that are impacted by this scandal is far more than, quite frankly, any of us originally contemplated. It's a really horrendous level. Just doing 5 or 6 inquiries, it's just not enough. But it's a step in the right direction. It's just not adequate.
No, it really isn't. Can I just ask you one thing about Lord Hermer, KC? He's on the front page of the Times today. His name's been in the news this week because of this idea that Keir Starmer is changing the law in Northern Ireland so that it may allow Gerry Adams to claim compensation, and not just him, but some other people who were associated with terror groups in Northern Ireland during the Troubles. It turns out that this guy, Lord Hermer, is a very personal friend of Keir Starmer's. He's now the Attorney General. He became the Attorney General last July. He defended Gerry Adams in a case last year, and he wouldn't reveal how much money he was paid. According to the Times, he was paid £30,000 for representing Gerry Adams. Now, I know that lawyers will say, well, you know, they represent an awful lot of people, but this does strike me as a bit of a conflict of interest, doesn't it?
You've hit the nail on the head. It's a transparent conflict of interest, and I understand he wouldn't reveal information in Parliament earlier this week as well. So there's not only a conflict of interest, you know, which would be problematic in itself. The principle here of taxpayers handing over money to Gerry Adams sticks in the craw. You know, my constituents would not be happy about this. And of course, we did bring in the law to make sure that this didn't happen. And I think because of the view and opinion of, I think it's one judge in Northern Ireland, this now is being reversed. You know, they can do things. They can appeal against this. It doesn't have to go this way. And I hope that they change their mind. But you are absolutely right. There is a transparent conflict of interest here. But it's not the first time, by the way. I think, you know, conflicts of interest is something that this government seems to tolerate. We've got it in the Treasury as well at the moment with Emma Reynolds and her relationship with China. So, you know, there's a pattern here, and it's not a good one.
And this is the same week that Tulip Sadiq had to resign, even though she claimed she'd done nothing wrong. She was rather laughably called the anti-corruption minister, and she's now being investigated for corruption by the Bangladeshi authorities, thanks to her relationship with her auntie, who was chased out of government. I wonder whether the Attorney General, Lord Hermer, is going to be the next sort of brick to fall.
Well, he might well be, and Tulip Sadiq's departure, I think, was inevitable. Her you know, role became untenable. There's potential, you know, genuine issues there and all sorts of allegations, but it was also becoming a complete distraction. Now, as a former Treasury Minister myself, I know that you have to really focus day in, day out. You're getting these subs, you're getting all of these submissions, you know, you're having to make really careful policy decisions. If your brain is distracted on other things, you're not going to be focused on the right things. So just sheer distraction sometimes in these things is reason to go. Underlying that, then, there's probably wrongdoing as well. And again, we're seeing this in multiple areas. And quite frankly, it shows that this chaos in this government. Now, I would say that. I'm co-chairman of the Conservative Party. But believe me, it gives me no joy to see this absolutely shambolic government, because it's impacting the lives and livelihoods of my constituents and people across the country. Kemi said this in a speech yesterday. If Keir Starmer does some good, we'll praise him. We're just not seeing it.
Well, that's the problem. I mean, we're getting the same response here. Even people who voted for Labour because they were fed up with the Tories and they wanted to see something different can't believe how bad it is, and they're now sorry that they actually voted for Keir Starmer. And you've seen it in the polls. You know, the lead that they had when they got in has completely disappeared. You know, they're now a couple of points away from reform, not very many points away from the Tories. You know, 45% minus on the approval ratings. I mean, I keep saying every week, can't get any worse, but it does.
It does. And look, the reason is, and the reason why there's so much anger against this government is because they lied to the British public. They said anything to get into power. And also, you would have seen, and I think you reported on Kemi's speech yesterday, because let's be very clear, we have had to do a lot of soul-searching here to understand why it is that we lost the election last year so strongly. I mean, we took a beating. We've taken that beating, but we do need to show that we understand why people were angry with us. And they were disappointed with us because we weren't delivering on core Conservative principles. And as Kemi said yesterday, look, announcing things without a clear plan doesn't work. We won't be doing that again under her leadership. You know, we've learnt our lesson, but this government, this lot, are doubling down, tripling down on those very mistakes. They're announcing things with no plan. So they came into power, and again, thinking of my Treasury role, a lot of this shambolic, you know, ridiculous policies that they have accepted, they tried it on, civil servants tried it on with me when I was there. At least I had the common sense to say no and threw it back. Because these guys did not have a plan, they accepted it all, and it's now policy. It's absolutely ridiculous. But we take our responsibility really seriously as the party, the leading party of opposition, and we want to make sure that we're a credible alternative government. We're not going to just be protesting. We're not going to be telling people what they want to hear just because it's popular and it'll help improve our opinion poll ratings. We want to make sure that we're an alternative government, and we want people who didn't vote for us to come back. We've spoken about this before. My appeal to people who didn't vote or voted Reform or Lib Dem or other parties is please come back home, because we share your values and we understand why you were frustrated with us. But for the sake of the country, we've got to get this lot out. It is terrible what is happening. We are highly motivated because they are destroying this country, and we need an alternative, and the alternative is the Conservative Party. But this is a long journey, and just me saying that does not convince everybody. I know we've got a lot of work to do to get the trust of the British public back.
Nigel, thank you very much indeed. Nigel Huddleston there, Conservative MP for Droitwich and Evesham, also co-chair of the Conservative Party, with not very much good to say about Keir Starmer and the Labour government. Well, nobody has. It's a long journey, he says, but I'll tell you what, it's not as long a journey as Keir Starmer's been on since he's been in. On July the 4th of last year, he was elected Prime Minister of this great nation. You would not be surprised to know that we've been tracking exactly where he's been going during the most recent few weeks and months. And here's our vision of you for him. It's Sir Keir, free gear, never here, no idea, Starmer's world tour. First off, he was off to Akrotiri in Cyprus, and then Azerbaijan. He went there for some reason or other. Then it was Belgium, but he didn't stay there long. Even in another place beginning with B, he went to Brazil. That was for some kind of climate conference, I think. And then, after that, Estonia. Good place to be, that. Very close to the Russian border. He was discussing things that were very important. Then it was Hungary, where he got out of a car and nobody met him and nobody wanted to shake his hand. Then he was in Ireland. I can't remember what he did there. Didn't even have a pint of Guinness. Then he went to Italy to see Giorgia Meloni, who's a much more popular figure than him, and also is going to the inauguration. Then he went to Norway, pining for the fjords. Then it was Samoa. Took 56 hours to get there and back. Unbelievable. Then, of course, it was Saudi Arabia. He went there to try and sell the Saudis some oil. United Arab Emirates later, after that, and then he was back in France. I can't remember what he went there for. Nobody can. Then he was in Germany. Shortly after that, the government collapsed in Germany. Then he went to the United States to see Joe Biden and told everybody that Joe Biden was fine, definitely going to be the next president. And then Ukraine, of course, today, and now Poland. Nobody knows what he's doing there. Soon he'll be off to Davos as part of the latest instructions for Keir Starmer's world tour. Unbelievable, isn't it? We'll obviously be updating that on a regular basis because he hasn't stopped travelling since he's been in. This is after he gave an interview to Chris Evans, remember, where he said, one thing is very special to me, and that is on a Friday night at 6 o'clock, I go out of the office and I go home to spend time with my family. Well, it's Friday and it's about 9:17. I don't know whether he's going to be home for 6 o'clock tonight from Poland or whether he's just going to keep going on to Davos. Who can say? Keir Starmer, a man who travels more than Simon Calder. And he's a travel correspondent for The Independent. This is Morning Glory, of course. We've got loads more to do. It's just I worry, says Will, that our government thinks it can spend its way to growth, but I'm inclined to believe that governments can't create growth. They can only create the conditions for growth. The rest is down to us. Well, the thing is, this government is under the impression that the way to create growth is to spend loads of public money, is to ask for people to donate money to them so that they can give it to other people. But that's not how it works. Growth only comes from proper financial dealings between commercial organisations. In order to spend other people's money, which is what the government does, you have to take money off somebody, so you've already somehow restricted growth, because the person who gave you that money can't then spend it for themselves. If you tax me more than you used to tax me, I've got less money to spend. And then I can't stimulate the economy by spending money that I've given to you. But you can stimulate the economy by giving it to the NHS, which doesn't stimulate the economy. That's an easy economics lesson. 18 minutes past 9.
Changing the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. What a beautiful name. The Panama Canal is vital to our country. It's being operated by China. China. You get rid of that artificially drawn line, Canada and the United States, that would really be something. All hell will break out in the Middle East. And it will not be good for Hamas, and it will not be good, frankly, for anyone.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. 21 minutes past 9 is the time. We're here, of course, until 10 o'clock. Russell Quirk in from 10, in for Alex Phillips. Kerry says this, morning, Mike. I'm really struggling to understand how the government can hand out millions of pounds to other countries and then borrow money from China. That's like me taking out a bank loan and then giving it to my neighbour, leaving me in debt. I think that's right. I live in Ilford, says Nicola. In the last 2 years, my 16-year-old son has had a knife pulled on him 3 times and has had his phone taken. He was just trying to get home from school. Why are these boys allowed to walk around in balaclavas? I think that's a very, very good point. Absolutely dreadful situation. We've had some very interesting comments from people coming in all this week, actually. Marty says this. My daughter has been approached twice by Pakistani men when she was in her school uniform in Sutton. It's everywhere. It's never happened otherwise. It's no coincidence, but this has happened twice to me. That's a shocking state of affairs. And the knife crime problem is absolutely awful. But of course, Sadiq Khan doesn't want to talk about that either. Andy has got a note for us.
Hello, Mike. Andy in Portsmouth. Sadiq Khan, what an arrogant piece of work that man is. Hey? He can't even get his words out when he's asked proper questions. He's like David Lammy. He's a very dangerous man, in my opinion, and the sooner he's removed, the better. Great show, Mike.
Andy, thanks very much indeed. Yeah, I mean, 2 clips of Sadiq Khan just today. One in which he completely ignores Susan Hall's questions about grooming gangs in London. He pretends to not know what she's talking about, keeps trying to bait her to use the word Muslim or Pakistani. She doesn't do that because she can see what he's doing, so that he can... he's basically trying to make her say something so that he can call her a racist. Then, in our last clip with Alex from the Reform Party, it turns out that basically when he says, could you please encourage others to help me get this particular piece of legislation discussed? No, he says, I don't encourage anybody to work with reform. I mean, it's unbelievable, isn't it? Absolutely not. Casey says, I think everyone's got it wrong on Keir. He's not hiding on all these foreign trips. He's on job interviews, just getting his post-PM role sorted. It's a bit early for that, isn't it? Let's talk to Andrew Montfort, Director of Net Zero Watch, because we've had lots and lots of conversations this week about Ed Miliband and how useless he's become and how idiotic his whole net zero kind of crusade has become. I mean, even people like Dale Vince say that carbon capture is a bad idea. But the latest story to hit the net zero fanatics is BP. They're going to cut thousands and thousands and thousands of jobs. Why? Because of net zero pressure. BP decided, despite the fact that they're a massive oil and gas company, that they're going to stop drilling for oil and gas. Why? Because they want to become greener. They want to become a more palatable company, and they want everybody to be thinking nice things about them. So basically, they're going to lose 4,700 jobs across their 90,000 strong global workforce. They're going to end work with 3,000 contractors, and they're trying to seek savings of over £1.6 billion across the business. It's as if the lunatics have taken over the asylum. Andrew, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike.
I mean, what sort of an idiot runs an oil and gas company and decides they're no longer going to be drilling for oil and gas? I mean, it's completely nonsensical, isn't it? It's like having, I don't know, a sweet shop that doesn't sell any sweets.
Yeah, I mean, BP have been on this sort of, oh, we're actually very, very green kind of trip for many, many years. And it's almost like the people leading the companies are too tied up in the sort of the modern zeitgeist, if you like, rather than actually doing what they're meant to do and focus on making money. And BP's expertise, let's face it, is in drilling for oil and making oil products. It's not in building wind farms. And, you know, to the extent that they have got involved in renewables, it's been a disaster. Well, I must say, I thought they were going to be trying to back out of all the greenery. So this is news to me that they are going to be pursuing the greenery even further. Maybe that's just PR spin, I don't know.
Well, yeah. I mean, they're apparently ramping up investment into green energy, is what it says. And one of their former chiefs, you might remember him rather interestingly called Bernard Looney, basically he said that he wanted to make BP net zero by 2050. I mean, you should see the state of their share price, right? Back in April of 2024, it was up over sort of 520 pence, and now it's actually fallen in December down to less than 400.
Yeah, I mean, if I was an institutional investor in BP, I would be trying to get the current management team out if this is the way that they're thinking. This is not a good way to make money. And, you know, if your pension was invested in BP, you would be wanting it out pretty quick too.
Absolutely.
It's going to lose you money, I'm quite sure. You know, that's my opinion.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but this, you know, the wider picture for the UK, Mike, these jobs going, is going to be really bad news, because, you know, those people, you know, I don't know how many of them are going to be in the UK, but presumably quite a lot of them. And that is a whole lot of people who are not going to be paying tax into the exchequer anymore. I mean, it's you know, this is very, very bad news. Ed Miliband has been, you know, he's not only attacking sources of government revenue like the North Sea, and, you know, he's wrecking that, but he's also blowing the money he has got on mad schemes. I don't know whether you saw the thing a couple of days ago, £410 million for nuclear fusion, which is something that the private sector is already doing. I mean, why would you want the public sector doing something that the private sector is already doing? I mean, this is just throwing money away, basically. He's a crazy guy. Crazy guy.
Yeah, this guy's name is Mr. Auchincloss. He seems to be running the company into the ground. Its overseas ventures, I'm told, now lie mostly outside of Europe, including development of the Cascada oil field in the US Gulf of Mexico, which I presume will soon be renamed something else, because it's now going to be in the US Gulf of America, according to Donald Trump, because he's changing it. But, of course, they don't seem to know what they're doing in the North Sea, because that's basically going to be shut down altogether. He says, I understand and recognise the uncertainty this brings for everyone whose job may be at risk, and also the effect it can have on colleagues and teams. We have a range of support available, and please continue to show care for each other. I mean, for heaven's sake, be considerate and keep putting safety first, especially during times of change. I mean, they've gone completely woke, haven't they?
That is absolutely the feeling, isn't it?
Show care for each other. I mean, talking to oil riggers.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what planet is this guy on? I mean, I'd be interested to know actually what his background in. Has he been transferred in from, I don't know, Greenpeace or something?
Well, I mean, you wouldn't be surprised, would you? This is the thing. I mean, you know, this whole kind of nonsensical, you know, greening of the economy, which has meant absolutely only one thing, and that is financial disaster for these companies.
Yeah, it's been a financial disaster for the companies. It's been a financial disaster for the countries on which it is inflicted. I mean, it's you know, there's been nobody who has benefited from it, apart from, if you like, the green blob, the grifters who are sort of on the receiving end of all the subsidies. Yeah, they've done very well out of it, but you know, it's been awful for taxpayers. It's been awful for consumers. Yeah, it needs to stop.
Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah, I can't find out too much about him. He's apparently a Canadian business executive, and he's got a very high salary. He earned a BC degree in finance from the University of Calgary, qualified as a chartered financial analyst. So he should know what he's doing, but he doesn't seem to. That's the thing.
No, absolutely. It does. You wonder whether he's a friend of Justin Trudeau's, don't you?
Meanwhile, we've got the old Davos World Economic Forum summit coming up very shortly. No doubt there'll be more private jets flying into Davos, telling us that we shouldn't be flying anywhere. More ridiculous climate nonsense being pumped out to all and sundry, telling us all that we're all going to die a horrible death if we don't start using heat pumps.
Yeah, interesting. It'll be interesting to see whether you know, the World Economic Forum and Davos is now so poisonous an idea that that maybe a lot of politicians won't want to go there anymore. You know, I will be interested to see whether there are any Conservative MPs at it. I'm sure the Reform people won't go.
No.
And I imagine there'll be lots of Labour, but the Conservatives may be looking to distance themselves from that sort of globalist madness, if you like.
Yes. It might be a good idea. I can't imagine Kemi Badenoch would get any brownie points for going there. I don't think she should, to be honest. But good to talk to you, Andrew. Thanks very much indeed. Andrew Montford, Director of Net Zero Watch. We are on the cusp, of course, of Davos. We're also on the cusp of a brand new president in the United States of America. This is the last Friday that Joe Biden will be president of the United States of America. So we can all sort of heave a huge sigh of relief for that, I would say. This from Nick in Nottingham. He says, "Hi, Mike. I own a nursing agency supplying nurses and carers into care homes. The increase to minimum wage again, nearly 20% in 2 years. Pending changes to employers' national insurance and mass work sponsorship have resulted in me deciding to close my business in May. This will result in up to 100 people losing regular work. Now tell me Keir Starmer's so-called plan is working. Are you serious?" Well, Nick, I appreciate you telling us that, and I'm sorry to hear it, but I'm sure that you will not be alone. There will be lots of people who run small businesses that employ up to 100, maybe 200 people, who are just not going to bother anymore because it's too expensive. National insurance is killing it. The minimum wage, killing it. We heard from a guy in hospitality yesterday. It's just not sustainable. Let's talk to Adam, though, who's a new caller in Nottingham, wants to talk about knives. Hello, Adam.
Hello, hi.
How you doing?
Not too bad. Can I just say, before I go into anything, your radio channel is awesome. I've been listening to it for a few days, and I've told everyone at work they need to get on there. It's really, it is common. You'd say it's common sense.
It really is. It is the home of common sense. It's what we do.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. But anyway,
what do you want to tell me?
My question is, you're on about zombie knives and banning zombie knives and all of this, and there's a lot of tension on zombie knives, a lot of resources put towards banning zombie knives. But then you see these stabbings, and when the pictures are in the paper and the pictures of the knife is usually a kitchen knife or a bog standard any knife. So a lot of attention is being put onto banning this, where kids will get a sharp object, whether it's a knife or a sharpened old hinge, you know, which I've seen people use. They will get hold of weapons. So my question is, should we really be putting a lot of focus on one particular knife?
No, it's a good point. It's a good point, because we're told a lot of the time, actually, by the police, that most people, when they are stabbed by a kitchen knife. You know, so the zombie knife. I mean, I suppose it's very dramatic, isn't it, when you see people fighting in the streets with them, and you see people with machetes and stuff like that. It's very scary. I don't know if you see that in Nottingham, but we see it here in London an awful lot. I've
had knives put to me. I've had telescope coshes pulled on me. I've had knives put to my face and my chest. Oh yes. Wow. I'm quite self-destructive, and I literally look them in the eye and say, onto the ribcage through the heart, and they literally brick themselves. These people who wave a lot of stuff around are more scared of you, and it's not these people that scare me, it's the quiet ones in the corner that have a knife and don't want you to know.
Right, exactly right. Well, listen, Adam, great call. I'm glad you love the station. I'm glad you have made the call, so really appreciate it, and thanks for spreading the word to as many people as possible. You should all, if you can, do that as well, because we are the home of common sense, and I believe this to be the year of common sense. We've got Donald Trump coming in to be president on Monday. Can you imagine how much better the world is going to be? Here's one from Stuart talking about Liverpool, because a story in the paper today, and it's a Cambridge University study, so don't start giving me a hard time. It says that people think that if you've got a Scouse accent, you're more likely to be a criminal than anybody else in Britain. And here's what it says from Stuart. The first time I drove to Liverpool in the 1990s, I got somewhere near the cathedral there, and a guy came running down the middle of the road with a copper chasing him, and then they proceeded to jump over garden fences, a bit like the Grand National, and I thought, yep, I'm in Liverpool. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham, and of course, this is the home of common sense, because you know it's the home of common sense, because one, it's called Talk. One, it's called Morning Glory. I'm looking outside. The weather looks a little bit grim and a little bit dull and a little bit sort of but over in Washington, D.C. This weekend, it's all happening. The joint is jumping, literally, because the inauguration is getting underway on Monday. Donald Trump has invited a whole host of different world leaders. He's invited the world leaders from Brazil, from Argentina. He's invited world leaders from Italy. He's invited world leaders from China. He's also invited world leaders, I think, from Japan as well. Several other countries around the world, but who hasn't he invited? He hasn't invited Sir Keir Starmer. Even though Sir Keir Starmer has been pretty much travelling the world ever since he became Prime Minister last July. We'll tell you a bit more about that. But it also means, of course, is that the Biden family, including Dr. Jill Biden, will be moving out of the White House, and I'm afraid they will never be seen again because he is not fit to run as president, and he certainly wasn't fit to be president. Just before we speak to LaDonna Harvey, co-presenter of Arizona's great big morning news show on KTAR in Phoenix, let's have a look at some of the best bits of President Joe Beijing Biden.
And now I want to hand it over to the president of Ukraine, who has as much courage as he has determination. Ladies and gentlemen, President Putin. President Putin. We're going to beat President Putin. President Zelensky. I'm so focused on beating Putin, we got to worry about it. Anyway, Mr. President.
I'm better.
You are a hell of a lot better. I wouldn't have picked Vice President Trump to be vice president, but I think she was not qualified to be president. So let's start there.
By the way, I'm proud to be, as I said, the first vice president, first black woman, served with a black president. I'm proud of the first black woman in the Supreme Court. There's just so much that we can do.
If they just paid 24%, 25%, either one of those numbers, they'd raise $500 million, billion dollars, I should say, in a 10-year period, making sure that we're able to make every single solitary person eligible for what I've been able to do with the with the COVID, with dealing with everything we have to do with, look, if we finally beat Medicare.
Thank you, President Biden. President Trump?
Well, he's right. He did beat Medicare. He beat it to death, and he's destroying Medicare.
Joe, you did such a great job. You answered every question. You knew all the facts. And let me ask the crowd, what did Trump do? Why?
Yeah, Dr. Jill. Yeah, you sure she's a doctor? You know, unbelievable stuff, right? Well done, Joe. You answered all the questions. You knew all the answers. Yeah, great. Let's talk to LaDonna Harvey. I mean, I suppose there's a little part of us all, LaDonna, that will miss Joe Biden and some of those rather ludicrous performances that he put in. We didn't even include him falling up the stairs on Air Force One or falling flat on his face or falling off his bike. I mean, those were just the sort of a few of the gaffes that we could come up with.
Well, unfortunately, there were plenty of gaps, especially through this presidency. Now, this is a guy who's been in public service for 50 years. He has known virtually, I mean, he started on a school board in Delaware. So he started at the smallest level of politics. And someone who has had an opportunity through politics, through that 50 years, to make significant changes to the United States, changes that would help American people. And through that 50 years, he didn't do that. You know, that's the unfortunate part is you look at his swan song, his speech from night before last, and he said, you know, we're in danger of having an oligarchy. We are in danger because the rich people are going to keep getting richer. And he's not wrong. But the fact is that he was in Congress for I don't even know how many years.
I know. I'm sorry. I'm just creasing up a little bit, sorry, because we're just watching him walking across the beach there, where he seems to be struggling a bit to raise his feet above the sand.
Right.
Sorry.
I mean, it's tough. You know, I take care of my dad who has Alzheimer's. And when I look at Joe Biden, I see, you know, little bits and pieces of my dad. And it makes me really sad. And I wonder, who thought that it was a good idea to put this man as the figurehead of the United States? I can't for the life of me figure it out.
Sorry, but that's him falling flat on his face. It was really unkind, actually. I mean, I blame his wife, Jill. But she was still pushing for him. I mean, she had to be dragged kicking and screaming out of the White House, right? She was still pushing for him to be president for the next 4 years. I mean, can you imagine how bad it would have got?
I can't imagine, because he is not fit, and that's the saddest, I think, part of it. There are parts of his political career that, you know, we're going to look back on and we're going to think there had to be a point at which somebody knew. Yeah. And you can put that squarely at the feet of the Democratic Party, Dr. Jill Biden, and even Joe Biden himself, who at some point you know that you're not functioning the way that you should.
And the worrying thing as well, LaDonna, is that, you know, the country has been in the midst of all manner of difficulties. You know, there's been the whole Middle East problem. There's been, you know, the war in Ukraine. There's been difficulties around the US economy. And, you know, in relations with Canada, I mean, in relations with the UK, I mean, there's been so much going on in the last year and a half. And you have to wonder how much of it he's even aware of.
Well, and that's why presidents have people, but I don't know that he is functioning at the kind of level that it would take to be able to diplomatically deal with some of these issues, or perhaps non-diplomatically deal with some of these issues. Yeah. It's just, he is not functioning as a fully functioning human being, and it's a little bit heartbreaking.
It is, and I can understand why you feel like that as well, especially with your dad. But let's talk about Donald Trump. He's going to be the new president as of Monday. He's got an awful lot of people coming from different countries, foreign leaders who wouldn't normally be there. But he's decided to sort of, you know, reach out to various different, mostly right-wing leaders, actually, from Brazil, from Argentina, from Italy. He's got the Chinese coming, I think, as well. It's going to be a very different Trump administration. I think you and I have said this before, than the one in 2016. I think he's smarter now. I think he's more mature about the job, and I think he knows more about what he wants to do.
Well, and you know, consider that from the minute that he walks in, he's a lame duck. Yeah. Meaning that he's got 4 years. He doesn't have to run for anything. Right. He can't run for president again. So, you know, this is really the time period where he has the ability to do a lot. Right. He has a Congress that is likely to swing his direction, although there are a few outliers in there. So, you know, some of the things that he wants to get done, he can perhaps get done.
Right. I think that makes him less of a lame duck in a way, because it means he's actually doesn't have to answer to anyone, and he can pretty much do exactly as he pleases. And depending on what legacy he wants, he doesn't have to listen to people saying, "Oh, but if you do that, it might make you a bit unpopular, and therefore you won't get re-elected." So, you know, that's that. But we'll look forward to it here in the UK, because it's about time we had somebody who's a bit less woke than we've had in the White House for the last 4 years. So we're very excited about it. What about the Obamas, though? That's the big story hitting the papers here this morning. Both the Daily Mail and the Telegraph have got on the front page what is going on with the Obamas' marriage. Lots of questions being asked about Michelle Obama not being seen in public with Barack since about August. Talk of him possibly having some kind of affair with Jennifer Aniston. What's going on?
An affair with Jennifer Aniston?
Yeah.
Well, that would be wild. You know, political marriages are political marriages. They're unlike marriages for you and me.
Yeah.
It's a very different situation. I don't know, obviously, what's going on with the Obamas. However, it would not surprise me if they lived very separate lives. I think that happens a lot in politics, because the expediency is you stay married and it looks good. And that's all there is. They seem to be a pretty powerful couple together, but at this point, they may be just sick and tired of each other.
Yeah.
Which happens.
Well, right. I mean, apparently she's not going to be at the inauguration on Monday either, and she let it be known, apparently, during the summer that she wasn't that happy to be showing up around the election. She didn't really want to take part in all of that. She obviously, I don't think she likes Donald Trump very much, and she, as you say, is more interested in doing her own thing. And he, of course, is intrinsically a politician and will always be a politician.
Sure. Yeah. She, as a matter of fact, has been pretty clear about not liking politics all that much. I mean, I think she kind of had to be dragged kicking and screaming into the political spotlight. I don't think she likes it. I don't think Melania Trump likes it. I think she does the very minimum that she has to in order to, put forth that front. And then she just wants to live her own life. And that happens a lot with political wives and or husbands who just shun the spotlight. You married the politician, you get the politician.
Well, this is the thing. It's like women who complain that their husband's unfaithful to them, and he's like, you married a footballer. What did you expect? She apparently admitted in a 2022 panel discussion, though, that for a decade, when their daughters were younger, she hated her husband. She said, I couldn't stand him. I know how she feels.
I think a lot of married people feel that way when they're dealing with little kids. I don't think that's unusual.
Yeah.
It's not unusual for relationships to go through those kinds of periods, and especially when you add that political spotlight. The pressure must be enormous, especially to just put up that front that, I don't despise the person that's standing next to me, even though right now I want to rip out his hair.
Yeah, exactly right.
Whatever hair.
And apparently one of the things that she doesn't like is what happened at Jimmy Carter's funeral, where Barack Obama and Donald Trump appeared to be having a very friendly and quite amused conversation together.
Right. And why would you even care? It's two former presidents. This is a sort of a circle of people that is A, quite small, and B, they know things that nobody else in the world does. Right. They have handled things that nobody in the world has handled. And many times you'll find presidents on separate sides of the aisle become great friends following their presidencies with the other presidents because they know and they understand.
Yeah, absolutely right. Well, it's going to be fascinating to see what happens on Monday. We're really looking forward to it here, as I say, and I'm sure we'll have plenty of opportunity to talk to you, LaDonna, about it. So have a very good weekend and look forward to the new era. As it is, the second coming of Donald J. Trump. There's been loads of great memes, thanks to LaDonna Harvey there from KTAR in Phoenix, Arizona. There's been loads of great memes that have come out around Donald Trump's inauguration. Let's have a look at this one. The other day, I think it was in the Times actually, about how now that the Biden administration is gone and is on the way out, the new administration is going to be filled with women with bare legs and short skirts, because that's apparently the Trump uniform. And I'm not just talking about him, obviously. I'm talking about the women in the Trump's various accoutrements life. And they've got a whole series, a great piece in the Times, a whole series of different pictures from Melania all the way down to different Trumps and their girlfriends and wives. They all dress the same, basically short skirts, bare legs, tans, glamour, sunglasses. Glamour is back in the White House, and the old gits are moving out. So we look forward to it. We'll bring it all to you here, of course, right here on Talk, all the way through Monday and all the way through Tuesday as well. 10 minutes to 10. Russell Quirt's going to be here shortly to tell us what's coming up on his show. He's filling in for Alex Phillips. How about this from Victoria and East Sussex? Sadiq Khan, politics before lives. This is absolutely disgusting. And John says Reeves won't let it get her down because she doesn't understand the damage she's causing and doesn't care. And Jay says, morning, Mike, London's got so bad, even Dick Whittington has packed his bags and left. Yeah, well, I wouldn't be at all surprised. He's probably been mugged or stabbed or something, or had his phone nicked. 10 to 10.
government borrowing costs hit a 27-year high and the pound is taking a pounding. Gloomy economic data is expected to show inflation and growth are off course.
Let me ask again, and can you please be clear? Will Rachel Reeves be your Chancellor for the duration of this parliament?
Rachel Reeves is doing a fantastic job. She has my full confidence. She has the full confidence of the entire party.
Can Rachel Reeves hold on as Chancellor?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 9:54. This from Jay. Morning, Mike. Another start to a Labour giveaway day. Just an idea on these refugees and illegal immigrants in hotels. What about if we invented a thing called a refugee camp? Surely that would slow the boats down. Yeah, absolutely right. Sadiq Khan is a total disgrace, says Nicola from Norfolk, as he demonstrated twice this week with Susan Hall and Alex Wilson. It's time to implement a 2-term limit on the mayoralty. Absolutely right. Let's revisit Keir Starmer, though. We did this a little bit earlier. Basically, Starmer's World Tour is what we're calling it, because we have put together all of the places that our Prime Minister has been since he's been in charge on July the 4th. Where did he go first? I wonder. He went to Cyprus, a place called Akrotiri. Apparently that was to strengthen intelligence. Didn't seem to work anyway. After that, he was off to Azerbaijan because he had to go there, I think, for some kind of COP29 meeting to save lives and to save the planet. He flew a very, very long way in a jet, using up an awful lot of energy and damaging the climate into the bargain. Then he went to Belgium, where he apparently discussed cooperation on our defences. I'm not sure who with, but maybe the EU, I suppose. Then he was off to Brazil, because he's, I think, doing this in alphabetical order. He went from Belgium to Brazil, both Bs, right? He was the new boy at the G20 summit. From there, he went to Estonia. Absolutely no idea why he went there. It's very cold, and it's quite near the Russian border. Don't know who he talked to. I think he had a look at a couple of people and had some soused herring or something like that. Over in Hungary, he was snubbed by Viktor Orban, the leader. He got out of a car and nobody wanted to shake his hand, which was a little bit embarrassing for him and for us. Then it was over to Ireland for lunch with the Taoiseach. Not quite sure what they discussed, but Ireland's having just as bad a time with their immigration problems as we are. After that, he thought, I know, I'll go to Italy, where it'll be a bit warmer and I can talk to Giorgia Meloni about how to stop migrants. She gave him plenty of tips, none of which he's actually used. Then he went to Norway. He wants us to have a look at their carbon capture. Doesn't work very well up there, so he immediately thought we should adopt it here. Well done. Super. Then it was off to Samoa, because that was where the Commonwealth Conference was going on. It took him 56 hours to go there and back to discuss slavery reparations. He said he wouldn't give them any, and then he signed a document saying he would. Saudi Arabia next, begging for money. I mean, they've got a lot of it. But then he was trying to sell them some green investment ideas. It's the world's capital of oil and gas, you complete numpty. Then he went to the UAE. Nobody knows why. He didn't do much there at all, but he asked for some more money. Then, of course, back to France, where he stood on that ridiculous Jeep with Emmanuel Macron, do you remember? Where he looked very much like, you know, a little sort of colonel. Then he was off to Germany, where he tried to rejoin the European Union and collapse their own government. Then he was off to the USA to see whether he could get any sense out of Joe Biden. He came back and declared that Joe Biden was absolutely fully fit and could definitely stay in the White House for another 4 years. That didn't go down too well. Then it was Ukraine, just this week, giving away £4.5 billion of our money that we don't have. 100 years of cooperation, he says. Brilliant. Poland today, nobody knows what he's gone there for. Maybe some kielbasa. And then after that, he'll probably be heading to Davos, where he'll get his instructions from Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum. And then he'll be back to London to spend some time with the family, because he always does that, because it's the only thing he likes doing on a Friday night. So maybe we'll see him tonight. Maybe not. Keep your eyes on the skies. It's a bit like the Santa tracker, this. Well done, Keir. Russell Quirk is here. Very good morning to you.
Good morning. It's like the Judith Chalmers of politics, isn't
He
it?
is. He travels more than Simon Corbett.
more than anyone.
More than anyone.
Yeah.
I mean, suddenly...
What is it he doesn't like about Britain that he doesn't want to be here?
Well, he's turned it into an absolute dump.
Yes.
You can't blame him. I mean, if I could travel as much as that, I would.
To get away from it.
But I've got a proper job where I have to be actually here every day.
Well, we're the ones trying to kind of put it back together.
Well, we are. I mean, patching it up with every sort of damaging...
Despite and in spite of our politicians.
The hammer blow that he plays on it. Yeah, it's absolutely awful, isn't it?
Indeed, indeed.
What have you got coming up?
Lots of stuff. You would have covered some of this, I'm sure. The toothless grooming gang probe, of course, at Yvette Cooper, very meekly announced yesterday. But, of course, only 5 locations, even though 29 police forces are investigating.
Well, it's a step in the right direction.
It's pretty pathetic.
It is.
Isn't it?
I think they'll have to do more.
Well, yes, but, of course, what it doesn't do is go as far as